with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, July 23rd, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Anthony Abram Jack. On the privileged poor, how elite colleges are failing disadvantaged students. Also on the program today, Kabul seeks clarification on Trump's comment about wiping Afghanistan off the map. The DOJ tells Muller to limit his testimony tomorrow. New report, 15,000 people dead because 14 states refused to expand Medicaid between 2014 and 2017. Budget deal struck will increase spending by $320 billion. Meanwhile, Trump wants to cut food stamps to kick millions off of food stamps and save not even 1% of the increase in our budget. 2,000 migrants targeted by ICE manhunt. Meanwhile, an 18-year-old Dallas-born citizen held by ICE for nearly 4 weeks. This is a rogue agency. Boris Johnson to become Britain's next prime minister as the sun sets on the empire again. EPA website purged of climate change references. And asked to quit by his own staff, John Hickenlooper asked Ivanka Trump for some support. Bill de Blasio floats a Con Ed takeover following New York City blackouts.
Second choice.
And Donald Trump is mad at Guatemala because his third safe country deal fell apart. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Just a programming note. We may have to turn down that fan. I don't know. It's pretty hot in here. Actually, 2 programming notes. Yes, this is No Shave Tuesday. I've just gotten a text in that regard. That's right. Michael's not shaving. And Matt, I don't know if we can cut to Matt. Matt is changing his look dramatically. He came into the office today. Did not recognize him.
He looks like he's in disguise.
He's in disguise.
I am in disguise.
And it's a No Shave Tuesday, partly because I woke up late and had to get Saul to the bus. And I hate to say this, but it's also No Shower Tuesday. Yeah.
I have not shaved my legs.
There you go.
Good thing it's not as hot as yesterday.
And Brendan, of course, does not yet need to shave. So, programming note.
Fact check.
Tomorrow.
Shaved yesterday.
Tomorrow, we will start live streaming coverage of the Mueller testimony in front of the Judiciary Committee at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time.
I'll be in around 9-ish, just to be clear about the...
Whoa, I had no idea you'd make it that early.
Exactly.
Michael, don't make promises you
You're
can't
goddamn
keep.
right.
Exactly.
I'm going to say more around 10:15 to be like,
as
geez,
of now, our understanding
testimony.
is that that testimony will last for 3 hours. Then at 12:30, Mueller will be testifying in front of the Intelligence Committee. I have a feeling we're going to live stream that too, but we're going to make the call tomorrow. There will be no regularly scheduled show. That will what we will be doing tomorrow. My sense is the only thing that we're going to hear is stuff that is from the report. It's not inconceivable to me that Mueller will sit there, get a question, look up the relevant passage, and read it. But even if that's the case, based upon all the crap that we have to ingest over the course of this administration and just more broadly speaking, people should know what's in the report. And so we're going to force feed it to you. And if you don't like it, then you can go, I don't know, do something else. So that's what we're going to do tomorrow. And we may try to assemble for the podcast essentially clips that would give you a Reader's Digest version. However, that's for your family. You got to watch the whole one with us, and then the podcast is to give to your reluctant family members, because I can't guarantee you we're going to do that. So don't I'm going to skip it and wait for the Cliff Notes. I go through this every day with my daughter. So read the book.
Try to force her to read the Mueller report every day?
Don't disappoint Sam's
believe me,
audience.
I would.
Read the Mueller report, young lady.
I get texts now. I try to get her to read a book. And she said to me...
And it was very interesting. And also, look up Felix Seder. Look up Felix Seder.
Felix Seder is barely in that report. It's really upsetting.
Felix? My whole theory was...
Mila, at the end of last year, she came to me. She had friends over. She's like, have you read Animal Farm? I'm like, yeah, of course. Aren't you supposed to be reading that? Yeah, no, I am. I was just curious if you knew what it was about. And I was like, yeah, I know what it's about.
Trying to do a little Blinkist action with you.
Exactly. And I said, have you read it? And she goes, no, I've read it. And I said, you read it?
I was just trying to unwind the ideas.
I said, where is the book? And she says, oh, it's in that box. And I took the box out. I opened it up. It was dog-eared at page 4. Yeah. And I'm like, you got to read this goddamn book. But I got her reading. No, she wouldn't. But I got her reading a John Green book right now. And she's like now texting me with every page.
I definitely read 1984. I just wanted to discuss the ideas.
Yeah, it's just the ideas. Oh, incidentally, check out our Instagram account. I don't know if we posted this yet, but we have. If you go to our Instagram, it's out there. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it is one of the proudest moments I've ever had. Here's a hint. Dave Rubin did a video, and then we did a video about Dave Rubin's video. That's the hint. And you can check our Instagram account. Our Instagram is what? The Majority Report on Instagram. So the Democratic House passed a minimum wage bill. Was it last week? Was it 2 days ago? I can't remember. I think it was the end of last week. And raised it to $15 an hour. Now there are calls from Rashida Tlaib to raise it to $20 an hour. The politics around this are fascinating only because we have seen the Democrats pass 50 some odd bills, maybe close to 60 now. They're not all incredibly substantive, but many of them are extremely significant bills. They're not going to be implemented because they're all die in the Senate, but they're important markers to put down where the party stands. Like, what is the baseline for this party going forward? And they have gotten no traction with the public whatsoever. Understandable on some level because of the nature of our politics these days. Understandable because they're not going anywhere. They're just baselines. They're sort of internal baseball. But the $15 minimum wage, in part because it was such a major plank of the last campaign. You remember this was Bernie Sanders' plank that was controversial at the time. We are now 3 years out. And just like Governor Nixon has radically changed the dynamics of New York state politics without ever having taken the oath of office because of what she forced Andrew Cuomo to do and the light that she shone on the dynamic with the IDW, a wayward group of Democrats who were IDC, who were caucusing with the Republicans, IDW, whatever.
That's an idea. We don't want Medicare for all. We get the
Bernie Sanders, in his running for president, has now was able to get the Democratic Party to accept and vote on in favor of a $15 minimum wage. And the problem the right has with this is that I don't believe they can get their voters, or frankly anyone, to care about it in the way that their donor base does. And their way that the wealthy element of their party just hates the idea of it. And so it's fascinating to see them attempt to undercut the $15 minimum wage. And we're going to talk more about this minimum wage in the fun half, but it's always fun to watch what Fox and Friends does, because this is the softest version that they're trying to sell to people. And it's pretty hilarious to watch them try and do this.
We were all in high school. We were in college when we had these when I was waiting tables. Yeah. Unless you're at a very fine restaurant, most of those people at the fine restaurants, that is their career. Right. But they make tons of money. If you're working at
now, I should also tell you that, look, the dynamic that they experienced, that they were teenagers and had access to these jobs, is not the same dynamic that exists today. Because the 25-year-olds or the 30-year-olds that now have these jobs were working in manufacturing or were working higher paid jobs. So first of all, teenagers are less likely than they were when these folks were teenagers to have minimum wage jobs at restaurants. And nevertheless, I don't know what the numbers were in New York. Something like 50% of the people working at fast food restaurants had families.
Yeah, like who works at the restaurants when the teenagers are in school or in bed?
Restaurants, that is their career. Right. But they make tons of money. If you're working at a McDonald's or a small little restaurant where you're making tips, you're right. If you're nice to the people, you make a lot of money.
Absolutely.
So what do you?
Other restaurants can hear about you when they want.
Pause it. Now, I don't know if things have changed. I want to go backwards because I want to get Kilmeade's comment too. But, it doesn't matter how nice you are at a McDonald's. You're not going to get $1 worth of a tip.
Oh, you don't tip at McDonald's?
I tip, yes. I leave it outside on the speaker on the drive-thru. Or I leave it on my table.
Yeah, exactly.
When I get up.
Just a 10.
Yeah, I leave a 10 on the table.
A crisp 10 for some good nuggets.
Exactly. So I
get escorted out by security. A
little bit suspicious as to whether they were ever teenagers or if they've ever been to a fast food restaurant. But here's Brian Kilmeade expressing a dynamic, having worked, and I was an actor and a comedian, and so I worked in restaurants as a day job. I never experienced the dynamic, and I knew a lot of waiters. I was in that sort of culture for a couple of years. I never heard of the dynamic that Brian Kilmeade is about to describe that apparently happens amongst waitstaff.
McDonald's or a small little restaurant where you're making tips, you're right. If you're nice to the people, you make a lot of money.
Absolutely.
So what do you?
Other restaurants can hear about you when they want you.
Correct.
So what do you think?
Are there any talent scouts here today? Because I would love to make the lateral move up from the Jade Lounge.
Exactly.
I've been here for a year, and I like the work we're putting in.
The restaurant
Table 4, I think, is a friend.
Like Seder traded to Dunkin' Donuts. The Hookie Lao Lounge
at table
picks up
4,
Seder
I think that's the brother-in-law of the manager from the Burger King down in Central Square. Make sure you give him really good service, and we'll all be over there.
Central Square Burger King picks up Seder in shocking trade.
Unbelievable. And so, like,
we want to option it for 2 first-round waiter picks in the next quarter, and then
a no-trade clause.
Yeah,
but here's the thing: is that this rhetoric, it works on their base. The wealthy. People who like their tax cuts, who are afraid of just like the insanity that's going on. But it's not going to bring out another single voter that they haven't already motivated. For them, it's just going to be the racism. The other stuff is just filler. But I do think that the fact that they're promoting that the Democrats have passed this is actually helpful. And it's the only piece of legislation the Democrats have been able to pass that they've gotten any credit for. So it's a fascinating, I think, self-own, but they need to address it, and they're not doing a great job of it. We will cover more of this in the fun half because there's some interesting fun dynamics that are taking place with them. Also, I want to remind you, I want to correct myself. It's majorityreport.fm is our Instagram account. I don't know who set that one up. I think it was probably me. Did I do it?
You changed my original one, which was just Majority FM.
Well, majorityreport.fm is better than Majority FM. I don't know what it should have been. Majority Report. I don't know what happened. Can we buy that from somebody? I don't know. Folks, whether you're trying to get a sweet deal on something or find the best happy hour in town, generally, good idea to get reviews first. Let's say you're going to hire a wait staff. You want to find out what the reviews they're getting in Yelp.
Yeah, you want to figure out the reviews. You want to read the talent scouting reports.
Well,
I'm sorry.
That's not the case. But when you're looking for software for your business, it shouldn't be any different. You can read thousands of real software reviews. Find the right software for your business at capterra.com/majority. Now, I don't use it for software adoption because we don't really use that much software. Although I was noodling around. We want to do something with the debates. And I was noodling around at some of their survey software. But inevitably what happens with me is I look at the enormous amount of categories that they have for software business, for softwares for different businesses, and I get sort of enthralled at the idea of all the different businesses I could be in instead of this one and how much fun it would be. They have over 850,000 reviews of products from real software users, more than 700 specific categories of software. You can join millions of people use Capterra each month to find right tools for their business. So you can find, let's see, last time I read from the C's. Let's just look at the H's. Heat map software. Hedge fund software. All the people who run hedge funds who listen to the show. Higher education software. Home builder software, which I'm going to be checking out. Home care software. Home inspection software. I've always thought I would like to be a home inspector, pre-buying, go around. That
Definitely
seems like a cool job. I
that.
could do that. Hotel channel management software.
Yep.
HR analytics software. We're running that on you guys. I got some bad news.
For yourself.
HVAC software. Idea management software. Identity management software. Inside sales software. I mean, it's nuts. All the different companies that you could. I had no idea these were even businesses. K through 12 software. Kanban tools. I don't even know what that means. Kennel software.
This is the sound of opportunity kicking in.
Exactly. Visit capterra.com/majority for free. It's free to check this out today to find the tools to make an informed software decision for your business, or just noodle around and think of all the different jobs you could have. Businesses you could start. Capterra.com/majority. Capterra, that's CAPTERRA Capterra.com/majority. Capterra, software selection simplified. All right, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, we will be talking about the privileged poor, how elite colleges are failing disadvantaged students, with Anthony Abraham Jack. We'll be right back. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Junior Fellow at the Harvard Society of Fellows and Assistant Professor of Education at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, Anthony Abraham Jack, the author of The Privileged Poor, How Elite Colleges Are Failing Disadvantaged Students. Anthony, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So let's just start with your experience that led you to write this book. Tell us how you came to write on this specific topic.
Yeah, well, I'm a first-generation college student myself, and in applying to college, I was a public school kid all the way throughout growing up. But then I went to Gulliver Prep my senior year of high school because I had a coach at my public school that liked athlete students, not student athletes. And then Amherst called me. They found me at Gulliver. And then something happened my first day of school. I was like, where are the other poor black people? Everyone kept talking about private jets or private islands or sitting on courtside seats watching the Bulls. I'm like, I'm the only poor black person here. But it turned out that half my classmates who were poor like me just happened to also go to prep schools like Andover, Exeter, and Deerfield. And through programs like Prep for Prep or Better Chance and different places. And we just made up the half of the students. And so when I got to graduate school, no one was talking about the experience of poor students who went to private schools before coming to college. And so I wanted to add that conversation. And that's how I came up with the term privileged poor, like lower income students who, although come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, we went to boarding schools like Andover and St. Paul. So we were educated and socialized right next to the students who were in the top 1%. And no one was talking about that. And no one was talking about what our experiences were in college because they treated us like one big group of students who did not know how to navigate this place.
I mean, it's a fascinating dynamic, and I want to get to sort of like, the application of this dynamic outside of higher education. But you've described this dynamic between the privileged poor and the doubly, you call it the doubly disadvantaged. I mean, just doubly insofar as what there is. Just walk us through that.
Yeah. So doubly disadvantaged are lower income students who enter college from traditionally distressed public high schools. And I say doubly because they're economically disadvantaged, but their real hurdle is the fact that the gross inequality in America is not between a good public and a bad public. It's the publics and the privates. And so the way in which they go to schools that are underfunded, distressed, overcrowded, that's their real stumbling block. It's not their drive or their intellect. It's the structural inequalities in America that keep certain people in secondary positions. So, I mean, imagine the culture shock of going from an inner city school or or a school that's very rural but with no resources and going to an Ivy League school. And that was a story. That's what I wanted to capture. It wasn't about individual differences. It was the fact that certain people were exposed to poverty and inequality, not just in their homes, but in their schools, and then made the jump through Herculean effort to get to college. And I wanted to bring that attention, but also to show that colleges are really prepared to educate those who either come from money or who had educational experiences that only money can buy, like studying abroad in high school. That's not something that everybody can do. That's not something that most schools even have on their radar. But that's the kind of experiences that colleges, especially like Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, value in their students. That they can cultivate that even more in college.
They're almost looking for people who have been socialized, regardless of where what their economic status is. They want to make sure that their students, and maybe I don't know how conscious of a decision it is, but they're looking for the cues of socialization amongst wealthy people.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, colleges hedge their bets, right? Even as they diversify, and corporations do it too, they hedge their bets. When they try to diversify, they don't go to the vast majority of schools. They go to schools that they know produce students who are similar enough to them that those students are not going to be surprised or experience culture shock. There's a reason why when I did my study, it was the first to show that 50%, one half of the lower income black student and 1/3 of the lower income Latinx students at elite colleges are the alumni of boarding day and preparatory schools. When you think about boarding schools, preparatory schools that cost $50,000, $60,000 a year, you don't think about a poor black or brown person. You think about a wealthy, white, predominantly male student who's probably the second or third or fourth in their family of the same name. Like, that's the kind of image that you get. But the reality is colleges are going to the same schools that they get their top 1% students from to their bottom 10% students as far as being on the economic distribution. They're going to those places because they know that after 4 years of navigating Spence, Hockaday, Middlesex, you are as socially prepared for an Amherst, a Williams, a Dartmouth as the people who are paying to go to those schools.
I mean, it's a fascinating dynamic, and I had a good buddy at my school. I went to Connecticut College, which was not terribly dissimilar from Amherst, small liberal arts school that had a lot of people from prep schools. And I had a buddy who was first in his family from Spanish Harlem, and I just remember the sort of the cultural cues that were completely mystifying to him. And I had come from public school, but I had was not as adrift, I think, as he was in many respects. It took a long time. It was fascinating. It was also fascinating when he would go home. He noticed the change that was imposed upon him by school when he was walking around at home. And so this cultural divide is huge. Just explain to people how it manifests itself, both in terms of like the various things that you need to succeed at these schools. So
it's built into the very structure. I mean, my favorite example is office hours, right? Who knows what office hours are going into college, right? Professors always say, on the first day of class when their office hours are, but they never say what they are. And office hours are just a time that faculty members are supposed to be in their office to answer questions or to meet with students. But it means so much more than that, because those are the people who can be your mentors, who can write you letters of recommendation. But students who come from more affluent backgrounds or who have been socialized in these prep schools, they know these terms already. They know what they should do in them. These things are not new. And so there are some students who come in, fluent in this language of what college life. They know what office hours are. They know that fellowship means more than just going to church. It means Beinecke, Rose, and Marshall. They know the hidden curriculum, that unsaid rules and hidden expectations that permeate college. Lower income students who do not go off to these prep schools encounter they experience culture shock because everything that they come to see in college is very different from home. The way you are expected to interact with people, the way in which you are expected to speak in class and make friendships with faculty members, not treat them as authority figures. And all of these things cause, especially in the W disadvantaged, this sense of being torn, because you have your friends and family at home that are telling you one thing about how to get ahead, like keep your head down, don't bother people. But then the college is telling you, no, bother us. Come to our office, talk to us. We want to know what's on your mind. We want to get to know you as a full person. And so they feel this internal divide happening between them. And it's like they're applying for a citizenship in this new place that they don't know how to navigate, but they're losing a little bit of home with every day they spend away from it. And so these internal dynamics that come to manifest itself, and it's not about internal, like individual things. This is how poverty works. This is, as I say, the pernicious power of poverty, the way in which it isolates and then separates. And what you actually see on the college campus is the way in which it manifests itself on the individual person.
Folks are socialized for deference, not entitlement. I think you've
right, among the W disadvantaged, but the privileged poor and their affluent peers of all races are much more entitled to a faculty member's time, resources, energy. I mean, I had students who told me that they had no qualms, going to calling a professor on their cell phone when they were away from campus with prearranged office hours. They felt perfectly comfortable being extended the offer, like, oh, call my cell phone because I'm in New York, and they called. That is the kind of comfort and level of ease that they have with working with adults by the time they enter college, and it helps. I mean, you need 8 letters of recommendation to apply for the Rhodes. How many people in this world can say that I have 8 people who can write confidently on my behalf and who know me as a whole person for me to get this promotion or this, this position at work or this fellowship at school? A lot of the W disadvantaged know maybe 1, 2 faculty members by the time they get to their senior year, and that person may not know them as well as other people.
To what extent is race and culture versus? I mean, I guess to what extent, I guess, is race also sort of like a double layer on this, right? I mean, because I noticed on one of the reviews of your thing, there was a comment from somebody that was something to the effect of, I went to Harvard from a good suburban high school, graduating first in my class, and then this guy goes on to talk about how he scraped and paid for the tuition, room and board. Spending money was on me. He worked dorm crew. He earned a little money. I was intimidated by my peers who had traveled to Europe and came much better prepared for college. Welcome to the real world. And he goes, he comments on what you had written. We need to make a concerted effort to teach students about each other. What a silly idea, this guy writes. Students can and will naturally learn about each other. To me, this is somebody who is not aware that he is part of a dominant culture where the cues come more easily. Is that, to what extent does this, is there a deficit, or not a deficit, but a gulf that exists even despite the acclamation that might come from like a prep school?
Yeah. The thing is, race amplifies class differences. Given the history of exclusion and racism in this country, race amplifies class differences. The fact that a white family that makes $30,000 a year lives in as disadvantaged of a neighborhood as a black family that makes $100,000 a year, that just shows you how, again, race amplifies class differences in America. When you get to a college campus, the road you take is very, very different, even between black middle class and white middle class students. Because even black middle class students have not had the access to the same kind of resources in their neighborhoods and their schools as their peers from similar backgrounds. So the question of just like this whole bootstrap metaphor that you can just like work your way through or just keep your head down and you're going to work ignores a lot of the history. But that's the nature of America. Like, we ignore history like it's our tradition.
Right.
And so like the way in which we have to understand these processes. But then even as I say that, talking about something that, again, is not talked about over everyone's dinner table because it's like kind of like what's right in front of you. The thing about a perfect example in the way in which like race can amplify these differences, I talk about a program where students get a scholarship ticket to go to events. And that's a good thing, right? Because college can be expensive, and not everybody can spend $25 every weekend going to a dance, right? To be social. But the difference is the school gave out the scholarship tickets on one side of the room and everybody who was paying on the other. It looked like reminiscent of Jim Crow South because there literally was a colored corridor policy that was in place, not intentionally, but in application because the students who were on financial aid were visibly identified as those who had to go to the other side of the room to do so. And you saw literally physically the black and brown bodies along with some white and Asian students on one line, but the other line was almost like its mirror opposite. So understanding how these subtle differences between individuals play out in the everyday experience of the students is something that we must understand, because it's not just that we do the diversity work, that we do the inclusion work, but it's also how we do it.
Let's, because I want to sort of broaden this out even more beyond the university, but within the context of the university, why is this important? I mean, that may sound a little bit remedial, but I think it's important to remind people like the value of this.
Because the thing is, what happens on a college campus, I mean, an educated citizenry is a better citizenry, right? We are better prepared for today's troubles and tomorrow's problems the more educated we all are, right? The more innovative we can be. Like diversity, like innovation, exploration, different ideas is driven by the diverse minds that we have in front of us. I mean, I can think of examples of how when you only have like a certain group in the room. Think about all the facial recognition software when Snapchat used to do the filters where they only picked up light faces, because even like people in understanding of tone didn't take into consideration different things. But corporations are better for it too, right? We have better ideas. We become better the more people we have around the table, the more educated citizens. That's just a fact. And we should pay attention to that. And the way in which inequality is completely shaping who gets to go to college, and especially like you see that even more, not just who gets to go, but what tier they go into. The fact that students in the top 1% are 77 times more likely to attend an Ivy League institution than those in the bottom 60. Like, we are hurting ourselves. We are curtailing our efforts in science and technology. Think about the gender imbalance in STEM and all these in all of these different worlds. We become a better citizenry the more educated we are. But we become even stronger when everyone is educated, not just one race or one particular segment of the income distribution. That's just a fact.
It also raises the interesting idea of some of those 1% actually going to a free public option in each of their states. It would be nice to sort of filter it both ways. What is the talk a little bit about, use this term hidden curriculum. What is that hidden curriculum?
Yeah, the hidden curriculum, I describe it. It's a term that a sociologist, Gene Anyon, came up with. It's the unwritten rules and unset expectations that permeate higher education. But it's not just higher education. It's any institution that we have. I mean, think about, again, I use office hours because of language and understanding that students not only should know what office hours are, but go. But think about corporations, right? Office hours in college become open door policies at work, right? And so the same process can continue. If recommendation letters in college are built upon relationships with faculty, in school, just as promotion and selection for certain projects at work are dependent upon relationship with mentors, right? So this hidden curriculum is understanding what are the hidden ways, what are the unsaid ways that this happens? How do you get that mentor? And it's usually some way that everyone takes for granted. Oh, you just go and knock on their door and just ask them questions. Or there's some implicit system of connecting with people or showcasing your skill that many people don't have access to, either because of their gender, racial background, age, or some kind of way that keeps them on the outside.
It also occurs to me that this concept of a hidden curriculum also sort of exists even outside of institutions on some level. Like at one point back in the day, I bought a house, and my ability to sort of navigate that process was a function of I had a buddy who went to law school, and my folks had bought a house, and I had another friend who had bought, like, I had resources around me because of just where I was positioned in life. And so I went through this, but I'm literally giving advice on buying a house to a guy who's working at a coffee stand down the street because he has access to no one else on how to do this. And that to me seems like almost like the hidden curriculum of life is that the exposure that people have to all sorts of like financial dynamics or just sort of broader dynamics of what I perceive as being an adult, but it's not just being an adult, it's being an adult who has access to people who have done this stuff.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. And in fact, I actually started using this in my teaching. One of my favorite commercials is the loan commercial with Keegan-Michael Key.
Right. The Rocket loan. Right.
I think the Rocket Mortgage one. I love that Rocket Mortgage and Quicken Loans one because the person says something in such a convoluted way that only those within the industry know, especially the home buying or the woman who's swiping on like entrepreneur. That means he's unemployed. Likes long walks. That means he doesn't have a car. Like he's being that translator. Part of you're absolutely right. There are so many aspects of the hidden curriculum of life, especially as it pertains to finance, that only certain people really have access to it or have a mastery of it. And that kind of control over that knowledge or those resources, the only way you access it is if you know how to play the game. And playing the game, you only know how, one, if you feel comfortable doing so, and two, you have the skills to do so, because it's a two-part thing. It's not just wanting to buy the home. It's like also having the skills to know who you should access about, should I do FHA? Am I a first-time homeowner if I did this? Should I take out a second mortgage immediately for the X, Y, and Z purposes? All of those things. Do I need to have insurance? Like all of those things, people can serve as gatekeepers to that information. How do you access those gatekeepers, whether within an institution or out of it, is incredibly important.
Right. And you need people in every community who have access, who have experience and access to this type of information so they can spread it to their peers, essentially.
But we know through the forces of the historical legacy of redlining and blockbusting and FHA loans, the historical legacy of exclusion prevents that from happening. We know how segregation works in America. It's not just who your neighbor is, but it's also what information that you have. We know that that's the reality. So some communities get no access to gets no access to this kind of information, let alone the institutions that serve those communities, the elementary, middle, and high schools, and also the colleges that do the recruiting from certain places. Because quite frankly, some colleges have never stepped foot and will never step foot in certain districts because they don't see them as places where they can get students from, or that students can, or vice versa. Students don't believe that they are part of that institution. Think about what Michelle Obama said about Chicago. She felt that Princeton was more of a place for her, despite University of Chicago being in her own backyard. Think about that for a second and understanding how place matters so much in students' understanding of themselves and their mobility.
What can be done, to deal with this? I mean, one of the things that occurred to me is the work that's done by Richard Kallenberg. Are you familiar with the stuff that he's done? I mean, I do. Characterize it for people because I think it, in some respects, what you've written about reminded me of his approach, which is in part born out of the Supreme Court contracting the ability of higher education institutions to to engage in affirmative action, racial-based affirmative action, and he basically proposes various ideas on how to achieve a similar outcome, but a better version of that outcome by doing it based on class.
Yeah, the class-based measures are a good step in the right direction, but the fact that it does not take into consider racial inequalities, it falls short. Focus specifically on social class, especially because when you think about like what I said earlier, that a white family that makes 1/3 of what a black family makes lives in as equally of a disadvantaged neighborhood. That's the lasting history of the legacy of racism and exclusion in America. I actually thought that the College Board's environmental context dashboard does a better job at not just looking at how social class inequality affects student, but it puts it in context of their score and takes into consideration. It's more intentional about taking into consideration how place matters in your own performance, especially on a standardized test like that. Taking into consideration both the family, the neighborhood, and the high school context, looking at measures like vacancy, neighborhood disadvantage, and violence, because we know that those things affect score. So it gives a more robust understanding of class inequality in America.
So if I understand what you're saying is that there's the test gives essentially a numeric value, let's say, to various challenges that are measurable in the context of a neighborhood, whether it's income and like you say, vacancies and other disparities, I guess, and uses that to create a score. Isn't Kallenberg's work, to my understanding, and I don't want to get too far afield here, but is that that his proposal was something to the effect of take the top 10% at every school in a city, for instance, so that you are necessarily taking the top 10% of schools that are typically overlooked, where maybe they'll take the top 1% from a school that is supposedly underperforming, but rather you got to take the full 10%. I mean, I guess this was done, if I'm not mistaken, or was modeled out in Texas. To see what kind of student body you would get if you were to do that, and measured it against race-based attempts to diversify, but using class as a surrogate, and found that you would get a similar outcome in terms of race, but you would get more of those doubly disadvantaged kids than you would under a strictly race-based system.
So the place-based measures have gotten mixed results, even in Texas. I mean, there's been a recent study that actually showed that the Texas really did have mixed results and all dependent.
Okay.
The thing is, what I want to say about this is also this: access is not inclusion. The focus on access sometimes hurts any efforts to understand what happens when students get to campus.
Right.
I believe that we focus so much on access, who gets in and where, that we forgot to think about in very critical ways what happens when they do. Because colleges serve as mobility springboard for students. How much of a mobility springboard depends on what happens between convocation and commencement. And I'm glad that you mentioned that you went to Con, because Con is one school that I think has, after engaging with the research that I put out, has actually made some of the most significant changes to how they work with students on campus.
Yep.
For example, spring break, we haven't talked about like some of the other things, but food insecurity is a major issue that's getting a lot of attention right now. 4 senators just introduced the college, I can't remember the exact name, the College Hunger Act of 2019, to address food insecurity as a national issue. And it is a national issue because roughly 2 out of every 5 students in college are actually food insecure, not knowing where their next meal is coming from for a certain amount of days out of the week. College actually changed its policy from shutting down during spring break, which it does happen at even the more selective, private, wealthy schools, to actually say, let me take a step back. They didn't only shut down during spring break. They used to charge students a daily rate to stay on campus. They completely reversed that decision. To now they not only provide for students, but they have other social programming to help students navigate that particular time.
This is for kids who don't have the opportunity to go to Bahamas on spring break or whatever it is.
Right. I mean, because the thing is, the fact of the matter is that there are some students who don't care about where their friends are going. They're worried about where their next meal is coming from for a week or two. Because students who can't afford to go home or who don't have a home to go to, or for those students who know that hurt and harm are synonymous. Think about students in the foster care system. Think about students who, for their gender or their sexual identity, are no longer feel safe at home, or they have to go back into the closet during these periods of time just so they can have a place to sleep over their heads. A roof over their head as they sleep. These are real questions that students are talking about, and these are students at residential colleges.
Right.
What about those students who are at community colleges, or those students who are at community colleges where food insecurity is the highest? Again, when we focus so specifically on who gets in and who goes where, we kind of forget about, as we diversify our campuses, how do our old ways of being become new obstacles for our new students? And spring break, because I studied residential colleges, was a major hurdle that even at a school with a multi-billion-dollar endowment, 1 out of every 7 students face some form of food insecurity because they shut down during break. I chronicled this for the entire nation of colleges that have adopted the most progressive financial aid policies, and only 1 out of 5 kept their schools open during elective breaks and fed students.
How does that level of ignorance, and I'm trying to be gentle with that term, but that is because on one hand there's a I would say probably an explicit understanding of like the value of having a diverse student body here, but then they stop thinking about it and don't even understand the implications of we're having a diverse. It's fairly obvious. Like, okay, we're going to do an international program, so we're going to have non-English speakers on campus. We better address that. But there seems to be a total. You're describing what seems to me to be like a total ignorance of the sort of the deficit of experience. Or the experience gap, or the cultural gap, I think is what you call it, of these students that they're bringing in. So there's an awareness that we need to go out and find these students in some way, and we need to create diversity. But then there's a lack of awareness that, to the extent that we're bringing people in to diversify our student body, we're not even conscious of how little our structures here reflect that diversity.
I was hoping that it was ignorance, to be honest. But the more I dug, the more I think it's not ignorance, because there are some colleges who literally have on their website, only if you are working on campus can you stay on campus and not pay a fee, or only if you are international students. Many colleges have protected groups. And they began to have a conversation that in my mind came harping upon who's deserving and undeserving of this additional support. Because I did hear feedback and say, well, haven't we given them enough financial aid? Like, why don't they just go home during spring break? I've heard that time and time again, to the point that to engage those people, I don't make an argument about basic needs to them. I have to make an argument about how is this hurting your retention and graduation rates, and how is it hurting you in the rankings. Right. Because food insecurity undercuts academic ability and social functioning. So if your students are going hungry, then you need to think about this not as a moral issue or a safety issue. If you are so callous enough to that, think about this as how is it hurting your bottom line. Right, and so I had to adjust it, but a number of school officials around the country had some pushback against, like, why should we spend this additional money to open during breaks, or to open food pantries and food banks, or partner with different organizations, when haven't these students been given enough, or like how much pampering are we going to do of these entitled kids? But the interesting thing is they made provisions for, some schools made provisions for international students or students who are working on campus. So it's not a pure ignorance. Schools are not ignorant of the facts. Even the school that I studied gave their athletes per diems during breaks. So athletes literally got a dollar amount every single day plus catered breakfast during these breaks, while their peers went to food banks, went to food pantries, ate one meal a day from whatever they can find on campus. One student I engaged with at a conference, she stood up in a room of 200 people and she said, "Well, Tony, I increased my online dating activity in the week leading up to spring break to secure dates the following week. You know, based on banking on gender norms of older men paying for the first meal, she treated OkCupid as if it was DoorDash." These are the strategies that students are adopting to literally make ends meet during these shutdowns that their peers at other schools are facing even more frequently. Like, we're putting many of our students in harm's way, even as they strive and bust their butts to achieve the American dream of walking across that stage or just simply receiving that bachelor's degree.
Wow. And has there, lastly, has there been, how hopeful are you their progress? I mean, it sounds like you're going around and consulting with schools and sort of helping them on this. Do you have a sense that there's an increased awareness, or at the very least, I guess awareness is not so much the issue. Have you been able to successfully shame or show them that it's better for their bottom line to have some humanity in this regard?
It's been I would have to say it's been more of a collaborative effort, and I am very proud of schools like Conn College that are not as rich as Harvard and Yale, but have taken steps to put what money they do have on the table and support their students through different initiatives, and the dean like Jefferson Singer, and Smith College has reversed their decision, and a number of Lafayette have reversed it. So it's been a lot of collaborative effort, and I haven't had to just go to look how this is increased. How this could increase in tension. I am optimistic that colleges will continue to do the right thing on certain issues. Not just because it's going to look good, but because it's the right thing to do. I'm optimistic that, like Senator Warren and others, are taking food insecurity as a major issue, but I hope it doesn't just stop there. I think that this needs to be written into the renewal of the Higher Ed Act and make it as part of something that will be longstanding and help generations of students. And I think colleges, hopefully, I can push them to also take a voice in this national conversation about why food insecurity and housing insecurity and other forms of inequality should be addressed not only on campus, but at the local, state, and federal level.
Anthony Abraham, Jack, the book is The Privileged Poor: How Elite Colleges Are Failing Disadvantaged Students. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, folks. I'm glad to hear that about my college. No, Brendan did not tell him to say that. I certainly, I did not. There was, we had, a long time coming. There was a takeover of our administration building by a coalition of people who were looking for the college to be more sensitive to the needs to diversify the college and the needs of those students of color who were on campus at the time. But I guess the wheels of change, they move forward. They may be a little bit slow because that was a while ago, but that's encouraging. Folks, you can support this program by becoming a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Don't make me play. I played for everybody else the ad that I found.
Become a member immediately.
Found an ad that we played back in the day. I wonder, when we produced that. That must have been old Dorsey, who's new again.
New, yeah. Second time new.
Right. Prodigal Dorsey returns. But the ad was, don't make me do that. Don't make me do it. Join themajorityreport.com. Become a member. We say thank you by giving you extra content every day in the fun half of the program. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Check out our AM Quickie. It's already in the Majority Report audio feed. Head over there, check it out. And if you have any comments, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Ultimately, it's going to be in its own feed. I'm not sure when that's going to happen. Maybe several weeks, maybe 5 or 6 weeks. I'm not sure when we're going to launch it out for the public at large. But good way to just stay on top of what some of the main stories you're going to want to pay attention to over the course of the day. Also, don't forget, Capterra is the leading free online resource to help you find the best software solution for your business. It's got over 850,000 reviews of products from real software users and more than 700 specific categories of software. I bet you didn't even realize there were over 700 specific categories of business software. I didn't even know there were 700 businesses. I thought it was basically you're either a lawyer or a podcast host, or you own a store, or you're involved with banks.
Okay. What about waitering? We talked about that earlier.
Well, you're involved with a food store.
Food store. All right. Fair enough.
A retail business.
I thought literally in the beginning you were going to say
There's talk show hosts and lawyers. That's all I see.
That's it. Those were the two options
a little
I
myopic, but I like
the two genders.
That's it. I just had two.
It's binary.
Anyways, visit capterra.com/majority for free. It's totally free. And you get to read all of these reviews. It's nuts. And you can make an informed software decision for your business today. That's Capterra, CAPTERRA, CAPTERRA.com/majority. Capterra, software selection simplified. Today is Tuesday.
Indeed.
And
tonight
will be Tuesday night.
We are talking about with little fanfare, Syriza was just totally crushed in Greece's elections a couple of weeks ago. So we're going to be talking about the lessons of Syriza, how that might apply moving forward or not apply for Sanders, Corbyn, and left movements around electoral politics. Then Crystal Ball joins us to talk about how to deal with the media bias against Bernie. What does that actually look like in practice?
She's not in studio, is she?
No, she's not.
She lives in like D.C. or something.
Yeah, I think she's D.C. And then Joshua Kahn returns. Last time he was on, he gave us really great practical lessons on organizing. As an example, he gave us the Simpsons lesson on organizing coalition. So we're going to do more of that and talk about what's happening in Hawaii, and we'll also touch on Puerto Rico.
I remember that stuff. Guy.
The telescope. Yeah.
Con?
I walked in.
I walked in. Yes.
And you saw the graphic.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Exactly that type of stuff. Excited to have him back in studio, joining us from the West Coast, and a whole bunch more, including, of course, Iran, the UK. It's a jam-packed, full show. I just want to say really briefly, I'll just mention one. Today, on Field of Burn with Brianna Joy Gray, I'm featured talking about Bernie, Lula, and Brazil. So give that a listen and subscribe.
Folks, this just in, the Senate has voted 90-8 on Tuesday to confirm Mark Esper as the new Secretary of Defense. This guy was, I think it was a Boeing executive.
Was it Raytheon?
Raytheon. He also refused to take a pledge to not work for a defense contractor more than, 18 months after he left office or
Maybe
something
even
to that
less.
Yeah.
They just
refused to take the pledge. Because, you know what? Basically, it's like, well, what are you going to do? Not have the defense secretary? That's basically what it came down to. So the corruption has become sort of endemic, right? Like, it's not even like worthwhile pretending you're not going to be corrupt anymore. This is going to be the legacy of this era, folks. You don't get this back. It doesn't. This is the one area where I sort of feel like incremental reform is not possible. You don't get a creeping back of ethics. It's not the way it works. So it's going to take something dramatic to get us back to a place where you have nominees who are basically like, yeah, I'm going to throw some bones to my friends at Raytheon now, and then I'm going to go get paid for it in about 18 to 20 months. Maybe if we're lucky, I'll be out of here in 16 months after Trump gets booted, and I'll go back in. I'm going to make a ton of cash. When that becomes the testimony that you give to get the nomination job, you know we've got a problem. That's basically it. I mean, I'm being a little bit flippant, but not too.
No, I won't.
Jamie.
This week on the Antifada. So, Andy and Sean recorded an episode with Prank Stallone, a.k.a. Chris James, the guy who prank called Sebastian Gorka.
Was he the guy who was coming on this week?
Yeah, Friday. Want him on Friday?
So, yeah, maybe. I don't know. It could be too close.
Guess we beat you to the punch on that.
I guess
Sorry
so.
about that.
We're going to be a little quieter about who we're planning to have a guest on.
Mm-hmm. I had nothing to do with this episode, so it...
I know Andy and Sean probably have listening devices in this room, but go ahead.
I mean, you might want to sweep the ground for bugs, yeah.
I do.
So, yeah, they talk with him about, the art of the prank and some other stuff. They also talk about bike protests, memories of the 2004 RNC, the continuing Jeffrey Epstein affair, and the escalating insanity of the migrant crisis and what we can do to fight against ICE and state violence. Also, dropping tomorrow is an episode that I recorded with Tithi and Chinzia, two authors of Feminism for the 99%, a manifesto. And it's a topic near and dear to my heart, and I hope everybody listens.
Matt.
Coming up this weekend on the Literary Hangover, we're doing James Fenimore Cooper's The Pioneers, which is the first in the Leatherstocking Tales. It's an interesting book because it's James Fenimore Cooper writes about, basically he fictionalizes his dad's legacy, which is that he founded Cooperstown, New York, basically at a time during the revolution in Europe, so grain and potash commodities were very valuable, so it was easy to settle a land and make it pay. But he thought it was mainly because he was such a great founder and settler. And eventually in late 18 teens, all of his speculations, he was the type of guy who would measure or lease property out to freehold without measuring it first, and that ended up creating problems and made his kids go deeply into debt. And to get out of debt, James Fenimore Cooper started writing books, and that's The Pioneers. So check that out on Saturday.
All right, quick break. Fun half, 646-257-3920 is the number.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy.
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost has what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them, just put them in rotation.
DJ Dannerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
psych. Fuck them.
Almost has what?
What?
Almost says what?
Hell of a lot of bank. Hell of a lot of bank. Hell of a lot of bank. Hell of a lot of bank.
you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
The alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black Africans. And the alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black.
You see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em, fuck 'em, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black. Alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black.
Come on. Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy. Pussy, 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 pussy.
All right. Let's go to the phones. Call from a 509 area code. Also, Cole James Cash.
Hey, is this Sam, Peter?
Yeah.
Hey, this is Ronald Reagan.
Oh, Ronald Reagan. How are you?
Good. I wanted to get your thoughts on the specific ways in which you think the Democrats are going to fuck up the hearing tomorrow. Like how specifically will it implode?
I think there is a very good chance that the Democrats will drop the ball on this.
What?
Because all they need to do is say, can you read page 2, paragraph 3 of the report? We've handed you a copy of that. Could you read it for us? That would be what I would do. And then I would say,
I think
I would, the way I would ask questions is I would specifically say, if Donald Trump wasn't president, would you have indicted him as a, for perjury? If Donald Trump, if collusion, if there was a legal definition of collusion that said, if I know you want me to do this thing and I do it, and then you go ahead and do something else because I did that, and then I do something else that you want me to do and I know you want me to do it, and then you do something because you know I want you to do it. Could you charge, if that was the legal definition of collusion, would you charge for that? Like, those are the questions I would ask, and then I would just ask them to read the report. I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully they've prepared for this because there's a lot of stakes on it.
I think at least 5 members will spend 4.5 of their 5 minutes telling him what a patriot he is. And then, by the way, clip this. This guy come true. This is a prediction time. This is like ESPN. And then another 5 or 6 members will rehash the same question needlessly for no reason, and then also call him a patriot. And then the Republicans are going to talk about emails, and then it's just going to sort of like poof into the ether. But I want to last question. I'll let you go. I want to see I feel like the ball has really been dropped on this whole thing. That the report is actually quite important, and there's a 2-week window where Barr was like, "This is nothing," and then everyone was like, "Okay."
Yep.
And I first of all, I think people deserve some criticism for that, but people who went on their sort of like in-zone dance tours, but before we even knew what the report said. But I'm wondering, like, are the Democrats capable of Benghaziing anything without Fox News? It seems like Fox News is a necessary element of that. I'll take your answer off the air. Thanks.
Okay. I think your guess about them praising Mueller as opposed to asking questions is probably spot on. And that's going to be effing annoying if we have to watch 3 hours of that tomorrow. It's going to be super annoying. But I listen. That would involve such a high level of incompetence, because the question at this point is not, is this a credible witness? It's, what does the witness have to say?
They're Democrats. So.
I understand. Do I think it's possible to do a Benghazi without a Fox News? I don't think you can do a Benghazi, but here's the thing. You don't have to do a Benghazi because there was nothing to Benghazi. Or to the extent there was, it wasn't even nearly close to it. The question is, it's not even just that you don't have to do a Benghazi. There's no way for the left to do what the right does. There's no way for even the center left to do what the center right does. We're dealing with different structures. The only thing I can tell you to give an analogy of this is that Air America was radio. Rush Limbaugh's radio. We talking to the mic the same? We may even present narratives, just counter narratives and narratives in the same way. We may tell stories in the same way. The medium may be the same. The actual content may be more or less the same, just sort of mirror images of itself. Maybe one is more truthful than the other, whatever. It doesn't quite matter. There's differences in terms of what's going to appeal to what audience, without a doubt. But the audience was different. And so the business became different. So that when we hired people who worked in right-wing radio, they couldn't monetize left-wing radio because there was fundamentally a different audience. And so the question isn't, can we do Benghazi? It's, can the Democrats do a version of Benghazi or their version of Benghazi? And yes, of course, it's capable. They're capable of doing it without Fox. If they would maintain a narrative, if they had a plan, because it doesn't even appear to be a plan, except for to ignore this stuff. I mean, that's the thing, is that it's not even a question of ability. There's no will here. There is a fear of being tagged, I guess, like the Republicans for Benghazi, because that worked out so poorly for them, except for the part where it probably helped Donald Trump win the election.
Except for the part where we win.
Exactly. Honestly.
Yeah. The New York Times editorial board was super disappointed in us. I think that's another problem.
Nobody punished the Republicans for Benghazi in 2016. I would wager there was not a single human being of the, what was it, 100 million people or so that voted in 2018 who even contemplated the word Benghazi when they cast their vote. I would wager not a single human being did that.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm sure it's not quite as bad now. But again, going back to reading about the 2000 election in Florida and that nightmare, which we're still living out, the fact that on one hand, you had Joe Lieberman obviously playing to the right and undermining the whole effort because of his own personal ambitions. But even Gore and people around him, like the Bush campaign is literally sending paid operatives to physically disrupt recounts.
Brooks
the Gore
riot,
people,
right?
Yeah, the Brooks Brothers riot. And the Gore people are...
Was it Daily that said, like, black people get disenfranchised votes all the time, so you should just not try and win?
I mean, honestly.
What's the logic behind that?
Well, and part of it from what I've been reading has really to do with like... they don't like us. Like the editorial pages of the Washington Post and the New York Times saying that they're being uncivil or disruptive.
Yeah.
They're more concerned with elite brand perception than actually winning that battle.
Yep. Well, I mean, it's the iron law of institutions, right? Don't want to lose your authority in institution, even if it comes at the cost of the power of that institution. We should just say, because this was like a cliffhanger from yesterday, we tuned into what's his face again? I can't remember his name.
Jesse Lee Peterson
to see Cold James Cash.
We were so excited about this.
And
this is
so
going to be a
they
clash
start
of
out the thing. We're watching it. Michael goes to the bathroom. By the time he get out, it was already over because the guy got booted.
And to be clear, this was like a 1 minute trip.
Right. It was a number 1, not a 2.
Yeah, this was a 1 and a hand wash, unlike everybody else in this office.
Well, whatever. Speaking about everybody in the office and hand washing, Larry Kudlow was on Fox and Friends this morning arguing why. I don't know if this is as funny, if we got to do this bit to make it as funny.
Of course we do.
But arguing that, talking about again, praising the Democrats for raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour and trying to come up with reasons why that's a bad thing.
Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, we've heard $15 minimum wage. Now she's saying, how about $20 an hour? One of my best friends owns some restaurants down in Florida, and I wrote her and I said, what do you think about this? Would you be able to survive? She said, quote, that would kill us. I don't know that we could survive having to pay that. Actually, I'm quite sure we wouldn't. Then they would not have any jobs.
Well, okay, interesting point. Look, actually, a recent study by the Congressional Budget
Larry
Office.
Kudlow, you know what Larry Kudlow really wants to ask? She's like, so what would they do with all the alcohol?
Do you have alcohol? Serve alcohol.
Sell that at 75 cents to the dollar, because if that's possible, you could just ship it up to me.
Yeah, you got a markup, and then you can ship it, and then they can pick up extra work hours. Get alcohol at my place.
So full bar, right?
Full bar. Well, the people who work there, are they black? Because we got more black employment there. Donald Trump. I'm drunk.
The thing that I did not catch the first time, her friend owns multiple restaurants.
Maybe a bit overextended there.
Yeah, or maybe you've been able to build your entire business on exploiting people who are working for you. I mean, it's like, look, if you got one restaurant and you're struggling and it's like, I hire 2 people and I'm there every day and I'm kicking ass and
like Dracula looking at a newspaper saying like sucking blood to be outlawed. This is going to kill me.
Right, exactly.
It's going to completely put me out of business.
No sympathy for the small business tyrants.
Well, that's the thing is that I don't even wonder like how small a business it is. Like you've got multiple, just roll it back on that because I didn't catch this the first time.
The CEO of Applebee's
honestly
said that we would be entirely eliminated.
Honestly, this is not a situation where it's like, it's just me and my family. We work the restaurant. We have 2 people here. Now, of course, we feed them every day and this and that. This is
in a situation like, say, small business.
Right.
There's only a few people, as an example. You got your own little enterprise.
Wage. Now she's saying, how about $20 an hour? One of my best friends owns some restaurants down in Florida, and I wrote her and I said, what do you think about this? Would you be able to survive? She said, quote, that would kill us. I don't know that we could survive having to pay that. Actually, I'm quite sure we wouldn't. Then they would not have any jobs.
Okay, interesting point. Look, actually, a recent study by the Congressional Budget Office, when you have these big increases in the national federal minimum wage, yes, some jobs, some wages go up for, some set number of millions of workers, but we also lose millions of jobs.
All right, pause it. Let me just, again, just because every time this lie is going to be put out there, I want to say this. There's 2 sets of numbers he's talking about. One set of number is some set of people, millions of people will get raises. The CBO was 100% sure that would happen, that millions of people will get raises. Then on the other end of the ledger, how many people will lose their jobs? The CBO basically said, we don't know. We have taken 11 surveys on this or studies on this. They didn't do the most recent one, which showed actually that there would be no job loss, but they had other surveys that showed there would be no job loss. And so when we aggregate these 11 surveys, we have a range of job loss that goes from 0 to 3.1 million. And it could fall anywhere in there. We just don't know. So we're just going to call it 1.3 million because that's the average of those two things.
See, we out of the score. I can still read.
So
read the scores.
They did it. They've tried it in a few different places. They've tried it in Seattle. The job loss did not happen.
That's right. That's right. And there are other sort of modelings that show, but in terms of like real world data, there is no real world data that you could predict job loss at $15 an hour. Now it's difficult because there are places in the country where you would anticipate maybe there would be some job loss because simply the cost of living is so much lower, and the way that the revenue generated by businesses is lower. But $15 an hour, I think, based upon all of these reports, is probably around the safe area where you could do for a federal minimum wage. $20 an hour? Don't know. There's a question. But here's the best thing that we should do. Let's do the $15 an hour across the country, see where it's at. If there's a problem, we'll adjust it. Boom, bango, boombo. There you go. Very easy to do. Go.
Point. Look, actually, a recent study by the Congressional Budget Office, when you have these big increases in the national federal minimum wage, yes, some jobs, some wages go up for, some set number of millions of workers, but we also lose millions of jobs because a lot of these businesses, small businesses, can't afford it. Look, here's the Kudlow remedy for minimum wage. You ready? I'm ready. You need to take notes here. Pull the pencils out, please. This is very important. We have tremendous prosperity. We are growing across the board. Unemployment is down. Wages are up. Consumers are booming. It's across the board. Every conceivable subgroup, African Americans, Hispanic, Asians, and so forth, less educated, less skilled, are doing the best.
And then wages go up naturally.
So we can have an unlimited minimum wage through private sector prosperity.
That would be great.
You look at some of these.
Okay, we don't need to hear any more because listen,
you say there could be 3 drinks, but what about an open bar?
Here's the problem. Here's the problem with this. According to Larry Kudlow, consumers are booming. Everybody, even the dumb people, are working. It's all great. Except for we have millions of people, millions, as he said, definitively, who are not only not making the minimum wage, not making a living wage. That is the reality right now. We're booming. Everybody's booming. So Larry Kudlow's theory has one element that disproves it, and that is it's not working. It's not the case. Wage growth is anemic still. People are not getting a minimum wage. If your remedy for getting rid of the minimum wage was working, there would not be a desire for a minimum wage. But it's not. And the minimum wage has not risen in pace with productivity or the cost of living for decades. So
you go to vet and they give you the coupons, they say you get 3 free beers with the coupons. Yeah, okay, maybe that's nice, but what if you went to a place and it just said unlimited? You just drink. That's the free market in motion. And by the way, they say stuff about us, send them back, whatever, whatnot. We're racist. You can be Asian and drink as much as you want. You can be uneducated and drink as much as you want. You can be black. You can be Hispanic. Just everybody's drinking.
All right. It's not just fanciful economics. Remember, Larry Kudlow was the guy who was talking about, if you go back and look at the footage of Larry Kudlow on Kudlow and Kramer or whatever program he had on CNBC in the summer of 2008 talk about how we're smooth sailing for the economy, you could not have been more wrong or incorrect or completely wrong on what was happening with the economy than Larry Kudlow. But let's move from the fallacious economic arguments and data arguments about the minimum wage to the moral ones. Let us find the most moral amongst us to tell us why people don't need a minimum wage. Who do we have that is the most moral amongst us, yet also has the ability to sound like the oldest junior high student in the country? Why, of course, it's Matt Walsh on the Daily Wire.
I do support a minimum wage, but the minimum wage that I support is zero. I think zero is the baseline. Zero should be the minimum wage. I definitely don't think the minimum wage, it shouldn't go below that. Okay, so there shouldn't be a negative. Nobody should.
Breaking news. Where's my breaking news thing? Daily Wire podcast host denounces slavery. There you go. That's pretty big. Go ahead.
Be charged money to work, so I'll say that. But zero is the cutoff. Zero is the baseline, should be the baseline wage for work, because that's the baseline amount of effort you can put in. It's possible for someone to do zero work, which means that they have earned $0. Do zero work at zero.
I would offer this that we're watching, assuming he's paid, is disproving his very theory there. Because I feel like we're watching someone who has put in zero effort or minimal effort, but getting paid far more for it.
I mean, I feel like he should be paying us to watch him.
On some level, we're getting paid to watch him. So that is actually happening.
Dollars, I think that makes a lot of sense. But when you skip from zero and you go all the way up to, say, $8 an hour minimum wage, $10 an hour, $15 an hour, $20, $25, I mean, there's no limit to it. Once you do that, it doesn't really make any sense. Because what you're suggesting is it's basically impossible for someone to do less than that amount of work in an hour. You're saying that if the minimum wage is $15 an hour, you're saying that it's impossible that anyone in America could do work for an hour and the work they perform could be worth less than $15. You're saying that's impossible.
Pause it. The guy just found out what the minimum wage means. But he doesn't understand. It's the minimum wage. So it means the least amount of money that you can get for working for an hour.
For having your labor reserved for that hour.
Right. Exactly. Because you can still fire people.
I mean, I wonder what Matt Walsh thinks about wage theft, which is basically the opposite of the dynamic he's talking about.
But let's listen to this, because this is fascinating. It really is. Like, I feel like I understand my my teenage daughter a little bit better when I watched this guy work through a problem.
You have to warn her against guys like this. And
believe me, she knows that. I'm just watching them work through sort of concepts that they don't seem to be terribly familiar with. That's interesting to me.
All the work that's being done across the country in any given hour, all of it is worth at least $15 an hour. I don't think that's true. I'll give one example. We could all point out examples, but just one example. I went to McDonald's the other day, as I have the unfortunate habit of doing on occasion. And McDonald's now, most of McDonald's I go in now have those automated things where you can order touch screen things. But I usually avoid those because they're touchscreen, and so you can see the finger smudges on them, and I don't want to touch that thing. I mean, how often are those things washed? It looks like they're never washed. I don't want to put my hand on a thing.
I wonder how much it would be worth it to him to have that washed. Question. Okay.
Avoid those because they're touchscreen, and so you can see the finger smudges on them. And I don't want to touch that thing. I mean, how often are those things washed? It looks like they're never washed. I don't want to put my hand on a thing 100 other people have touched.
Yeah, we
right
get
before
it,
I'm about
Matt.
to eat. It's gross. When I can see their gross, greasy, disgusting hand marks on it. So then I went to the cashier, and so here's how that interaction worked. That interaction went verbatim. And as I said, we've all had interactions like this. So I walk up, the cashier goes, "Can I help you?" Yes, I'll have the large number 1, please. Thank you.
Big Mac.
That it? Yes. That's $6.57. Oh, actually, sorry. Can you change that to a medium? Okay.
Pause it. I want to remind you, he's being paid for this. He's being paid money for this.
Isn't this a good
But here's the
time?
interesting thing. Now let's just stop here because this would also blow his mind. That meal number 1 for $6.57. That means that meal, according to Matt Walsh, you can't find that meal at a different price anywhere else in the country. Right? Because prices are fixed. There has to be more or less value on that. It's just this concept that he's saying that his service is not worth $15 an hour or is not worth the person who gave him service, the one who treated him nicely at McDonald's. I mean, give me a break. The idea that this guy could make $1 more than zero or any more than like half the people that we watch the stuff, even stuff that we disagree with. This is bad. Just from an entertainment perspective, it's bad. It's bad. I know I'm making money mocking it, and it's still painful.
It just blows my mind that he would think that he doesn't come off like the worst person in the world in this.
The point is that he is proving, maybe it's some type of art project, but he's proving that the value of labor is completely subjective. And sometimes you get super lucky and sometimes you don't get lucky. And setting a minimum so that people can eat and not be exploited is the same theory behind why we say children cannot work. We have child labor laws, or why we have 40-hour work weeks. Because we don't want people to be exploited simply because as a human being, you need to eat and need to have a place to sleep. You need food and shelter. Maybe you want to provide some other amenities for your kids or your family. And so that's what we've decided as a society. The more they talk about how people don't deserve a living wage, the more they insulate themselves. They will gain no new voters from this. And they will just remind people that the Democratic Party is the one who is ensuring that at the very least there is a minimum wage. That the idea that you set aside an hour to work and go work and create value beyond your wages for other people. And it's true. There will be some job loss because of this in some. There has to be some. But the revenue generated will create other jobs.
Velocity of money.
Exactly.
Well, look, all labor under capitalism is technically exploitation. That's not a value judgment. That's just a
well, it
fact
has
of how
to
the
be,
system
or
works.
your business would go out of business.
Yes, exactly. That's how it functions. But, you know, there are certainly matters of degree. There's exploitation, and then there's the kind of hyper exploitation that we see with these kinds of jobs that don't pay enough for people to keep on living or reproduce themselves as a class, you know, and that's one of the contradictions that we talked about this week with Teethy and Chidzia, the tendency of capitalism to, on the one hand, in order to keep functioning, it needs human beings, right? It needs workers to continue being alive so they can work. And on the other hand, its tendency to try to squeeze the conditions for social reproduction so much that people cannot reproduce themselves or stay alive anymore.
Right, they limited their bargaining power.
Much less serious point, but I'm not the biggest Jerry Seinfeld fan in the world, but he is an actual comedian who did actual structure to his jokes, and all of these idiots have grown up watching it, and they think that somehow like just complaining about the smudges or the fingerprints on the computer on the terminal that you use bitching and kvetching about that is sufficient for a bit without any structure around it.
It also undercuts his entire point, which shows that you need
to be paid a lot
human
more.
beings.
Indeed.
Right?
I would argue. I actually worked at McDonald's in high school. I would argue that worker has probably put in as much effort relative to the amount that he's compensated for the cost of that number one meal that he got there. He's probably doing his part.
I mean,
I would
honestly,
also be really interested.
I would be. It would be fascinating to find out, like, so what the rate of pay that Matt Walsh is getting for this relative to the quality.
Yeah. Do you want a little bit more?
Let's listen to a little bit
It'd
more.
be interesting to see if this reaction to him was different than anybody else he interacts with in life.
Right, exactly.
Like, yes. What else?
Wonder
Anything
why it
else
is
you
all the
need?
clerks I go to all seem to be really annoyed.
Why does my mom hate me?
Yeah.
And that's how it went. Now, let me ask you, somebody like that, someone who that's all they do. That is the amount. They can't even be troubled to enunciate their words. Like, they can barely even put in the effort to speak. They're barely sentient. You're almost watching them melt in front of you into this just lump of matter. They're barely even there.
Do they deserve?
Because of just how utterly disinterested they are, and not only disinterested.
I'll just skip a little bit ahead because he does this for another minute. We can get the tail end of the clip.
It's just like, how much can I argue that this person's not worthy of $15 an hour?
They can do. This is what they're getting paid to do. You might as well put a little effort in. They don't want to put any effort in. So with someone like that, are they worth 50 automatically worth is doing that? Sighing, rolling your eyes. Okay. Is that automatically worth $15 an hour?
You know what I noticed? This guy couldn't even be bothered to put his frickin' his microphone on his shirt properly. Look at the way it's pinched. There's a proper way to put on your lavalier mic instead of throwing it on there. It's disgusting.
Why does he have a lav mic and that mic in front of him?
That's a good question. Sometimes you do that. They get both. I don't know. That's stupid though.
I'd also ask Matt, who determines whether work has been done or not? Because if I was his boss, I'd be like, you're going to go back and re-record that, buddy.
Look, you're going to put on a show. How about doing something with your backdrop that doesn't look like you're just sitting in your sloppy ass corner? I mean, are those? What kind of braces does he have on that shelving? It's embarrassing. Those are outdoor braces. God. Disgusting.
I would like to personally shake the hand of whichever fast food worker was rude to Matt Walsh because you're doing the Lord's work.
That's unbelievable.
Can I make a recommendation as well? This week on the Trillbilly Workers Party podcast, which is super, super excellent. They had Emily Gundelsberger on, who wrote a book called On the Clock, What Low-Wage Work Did to Me and How It Drives America Insane.
I've heard about that. I think she's on our list to
classic is all. I mean, Nickeled and Dimed
really
by
good.
Barbara.
Yeah,
Ann, right?
it definitely is in that lineage.
Really brutal book, really important book.
I mean, that's the I guess the clear point about this is the amount of wage theft that these types of companies do from their employees by making them do extra work and not fully compensating them. Like,
and the way that people treat you, like you're less than human. Like
Matt Walsh.
Like you're their slave.
Like you're just going to melt away.
And like the psychological toll that takes on people, I think is very apparent from watching that clip just now.
And I can tell you this too. There's such a tremendous amount of emotional myopia involved in that. Because I spent, I don't know, probably 3 years waiting tables, and there is no doubt that my disposition and perspective on what I was doing was much easier to deal with. The work itself was much easier to deal with because I knew like this is not what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. I have been given, sort of an elite education. I have access to I have access to just about every possible resource. And I wasn't a Rockefeller, but certainly I have access to resources. My father's an attorney, and I know people who sell cars, and I know people who are electricians, and I know a lot of different. I have access to a lot of different resources. I know people who are mortgage brokers or whatever it is, and I knew this was a way station for me. But the idea that you could say like, well, I don't have an education. There's not a lot of jobs around. I can either wait tables here, or I can go and, I don't know, dig ditches or whatever it is. I'm not saying that people should be sullen on every job that they should have, but at the very least, their job should provide them enough resources so that they can live a decent life. And maybe explore other avenues, but have the resources to be able to do that to some extent. I'm able to take a day off, or I don't have to go for that time and a half so that I can pay my rent. If I'm super ambitious, I can afford to not pick up the extra weekend hours and go investigate something else. I mean, resources beget resources. And to not be aware of that, I think, is both an intellectual and emotional deficit, particularly by someone like, I don't know what Matt Walsh's background is. Maybe he was just working at a McDonald's, and every time he would come up, he would get someone to come up at the counter. He would be so effervescent that somebody said, "Hey, you seem like a great guy. I'm going to tell this other restaurant about you, and you're going to work your way up through the restaurants." And then he got a job at like a, more of like an Outback Steakhouse type of situation. And he was there and he was serving somebody, and someone said, "Hey, we've got an opening at the Daily Caller."
He was bringing a high chair for Ben.
Would you like to do a podcast for us? And that's the way I got discovered, by just being outgoing at my restaurant job. Give me a break. Donald Trump hit the international stage this week. Yes. Who was he with when he was there?
Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan.
He is with the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and as you know,
Khan College, folks.
Did I get my list of things to say and things not to say?
As you know,
well, this is another one actually.
Many of
they goaded each other over Twitter.
The borders between Afghanistan and Pakistan are a little bit porous. We funded a lot of money back in the 80s to create madrasas so that we could help build basically an army of zealots who would fight off the Russians. And, unintended consequences, all that type of thing. Sometimes the thing about zealots is very hard to turn them off once you've turned them on. And Pakistan definitely has I think, a vested interest in keeping Afghanistan in somewhat disarray and weakened. And Donald Trump, I think, maybe felt a little challenged by that and needed to show off some of his muscle.
Airway News TV Pakistan.
Say it again.
Sir, this is Jahan Ali from Airway News TV Pakistan. Lindsey Graham, when he met Imran Khan, he says, you both are kind of same personalities. You are the president who fulfilled all your promises. You made
I do.
Campaign. And the same like Imran Khan, he's also fulfilling all the promises. So how do you see this meeting, like same kind of person, straight to the point?
Well, I think we're going to have a great meeting today. I know that it's an important meeting. I consider this a very important meeting because I think we haven't met the potential of either country. I think the potential with Pakistan and likewise the opposite way. I think we have not even come close to meeting it. There is tremendous potential between our country and Pakistan. I think Pakistan's going to help us out to extricate ourselves. We're like policemen. We're not fighting a war. If we wanted to fight a war in Afghanistan and win it, I could win that war in a week. I just don't want to kill 10 million people. Does that make sense to you? I don't want to kill 10 million people. I have plans on Afghanistan that if I wanted to win that war, Afghanistan would be wiped off the face of the earth. It would be gone. It would be over in literally in 10 days. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to go that route. So we're working with Pakistan and others to extricate ourselves, nor do we want to be policemen, because basically we're policemen right now.
Imagine you're in Afghanistan and Donald Trump has announced we have plans to wipe out Afghanistan, kill 10 million people. But because I'm such a nice guy, we decided not to do it.
Not in the mood.
I mean, it's so bizarre because this is an area where they actually are having pretty successful negotiations with the Taliban, apparently. And there is progress in getting out of there. So it's an area where, at the very least, he's not hurting relative to the disaster that it's been since the invasion. But that musing, and of course combined with the fact that that's one of the first things he did when he was president, was drop the mother of all bombs on Afghanistan.
Right.
And it's always in the context of unshackling the military. Each year he's been president, civilian casualties have gone up significantly because it's just not part of the calculation process. I know that, they've been sort of going back and forth on Twitter. And, Khan's point when he first got into office was a lot of Pakistanis are dying too, as your sort of security subcontractors here. And Trump's point is, yeah, but you guys are playing a double game with us. And like both of those things are totally true. And then Khan ordered an arrest of one of the masterminds of that Oberoi hotel attack that happened in 2008. So this is another weird one where like Trump gets a win.
Well,
because of this sort of like, but also because, Khan is in a really tough position, and
I feel like that's always been the relationship with Pakistan.
It's a different variation of what the relationship has always been. It's just now you have like these two celebrity figures doing it, and it's also funny because
they're just a flashier. But I have a feeling this is going back and forth. I have a feeling like Bin Laden was a gift relative to I think the Obama administration signed off on some nuclear technology or something to that effect. I mean, I think there was all sorts of.
If you go back to the 80s, another legacy of Reagan, it's not just that we were funding aggressively the Mujahideen. They were actively undermining even, you talk about objective research, the arms control community was aggressively fought against by the CIA and the Reagan administration from establishing the Pakistani nuclear program in the 80s. So that's another legacy.
From establishing that it existed.
That it existed. Yes. You get into serious career trouble if you noted the obvious.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 478 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Folks, we're not going to get to everybody on the call. So if you've been hanging on for a little bit of time, 478. 478? Nothing? Let's go to 765. 765.
Hello, Sam.
Yes.
Hello, Sam.
Yes.
Hey, my name's Jeremy. I'm from the great hellhole known as Muncie, Indiana.
Oh, hellhole, Muncie, Indiana. Great.
Yep, David Letterman's alma mater.
Oh, very nice.
But yeah, hey, my congressman is a unknown guy by the name of Greg Pence. His name might sound familiar. He's the older brother of Mike Pence,
Oh, geez.
our vice president.
Nice.
So yeah, he actually has an idea for reparations. Apparently, I've never heard this guy speak until a couple weeks ago, and he's been my congressman now for about 7-8 months.
Wow. Okay.
And he has an idea for reparations, but for the victims of the 1983 Beirut bombing.
Okay.
Which just came totally out of left field.
I wonder what that's about. I mean, I don't know really what...
This is part of instigating for the war against Iran.
Okay.
I have no doubt
Beirut,
that's what it's
right,
about.
Of course.
Beirut, Hezbollah, Iran.
Yes.
It's warmongering.
Yeah. It's just a way to bring up another issue of what Iran has supposedly done.
Right. Well, this is also concerning because with Mr. Pence being our congressman, where I live at is a heavily Democrat stronghold, one of the very, very small ones here in Indiana.
Democratic stronghold, yes.
And we are, right. So we've been having some scandals lately. Last week, the FBI marched out 2 members of our city government out in handcuffs.
Wow.
And they raided City Hall. This has been the second raid, in the past 2 years.
Do you know where Hoff is buried?
It's, basic run-of-the-mill corruption, pay for play, stuff like that.
Wow.
But my concern is, with this all going on, my concern is for Democrats voting in this part of the state. Obviously, there's a lot of Trumpers here, and I've gotten death threats. I've gotten threats of violence against me because I'm a diehard Bernie supporter, and I'm also an Iraq veteran, which I guess is anathema here in this part of the country.
Right.
But yeah, I'm just concerned with, apparently there's a lot of optics going on with this Democrat corruption here in Muncie of how it's going to affect this part of Indiana because of, being a rest of this district being a red district.
Well, I don't know what the answer is to that. I mean, I don't know enough about it to know if it would impact the dynamic there, but, man, my suggestion to you might be move.
Yeah, I've been trying to talk my wife into that, but she wants to go to South Carolina. I'm like, okay, so out of the frying pan
into the fire. At least the weather will be nicer.
Yep.
Well,
hey, thanks for taking my call, Sam.
Thanks for the call. Go to South Carolina and then just move up to Asheville.
I've been
That's
to
what
Asheville.
I'm saying. Go to South Carolina and just keep moving.
Wonderful place full of hippies in the mountains.
I've never been there, but I've heard very good things about it.
Really good vegan food. I'll say that.
This is hard to control, this phone thing here. Wait a second. I'm a little bit lost. Where is this? Oh, here we go. Okay. Calling from a 3-1. This is overseas. 227.
Hello, is it me?
Yes, this is you.
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, wow. Sorry, I'm making ice cream at the moment.
Of course you are.
I wanted to talk about Andrew Yang and UBI for a moment.
All right, where are you calling from?
Oh, sorry. I'm David. I'm calling from the Netherlands.
Okay.
Yeah. So, as I understand it, you are okay with UBI. Sorry, I'm nervous. You are okay with UBI, but you want the good UBI, being that it's an addition to your current welfare system,
right?
And it doesn't right.
Right. My biggest fear about the UBI, for the most part, okay. I mean, I think there's an argument that it's not really universal because it's you could take it back in terms of taxes, et cetera, et cetera. But my biggest problem with the UBI and also the VAT, yes, I get if you're paying, an extra $100 a month on some type of VAT tax, but you're getting $900 back, yes, that's fine. But the VAT itself is still a regressive way to pay for it. But that aside, my biggest concern about the UBI is not from necessarily a policy perspective, but rather from a political perspective, that it opens the door to cutting a whole raft of programs that some need improvement. Some, I think, function quite well as economic stabilizers, like food stamps, for instance. And I think that's problematic. From the Andrew Yang perspective, when I've seen him questioned on it, he doesn't seem to have a problem with a lot of those programs going away. That makes me nervous. But go ahead.
Well, I wouldn't be I can't call myself an Andrew Yang supporter because I'm not American, but I wouldn't be an Andrew Yang supporter. My first choice would be Bernie Sanders. But the thing with those welfare programs is that they don't give people a lot of freedom, right? So if you have food stamps, for example, you can only spend it on food, and it's and you have an administration that's all right, who does deserve food stamps, who doesn't deserve food stamps, and if you get a job, maybe all of a sudden you don't deserve welfare anymore, so you are limited in your freedom.
Well,
whereas with the UBI, you can just do what you want.
Can I ask a question? So, caller, if you had, and I agree that there are certain problems with certain welfare programs that they're too restrictive, right? But let's say you could have the option of taking $1,000 in Yang bucks, or you can take $1,000 in good UBI bucks plus $200 in the food stamps that you've already had. You just keep getting those, and you get your additional $1,000. Which would you rather have?
Well, I would go for the $1,200 with the extra welfare bucks. Yes.
Right.
Right. But so, are you familiar with? By the way, you guys, I don't know what your name is, the person who just spoke, but I listened to your podcast where you talked about Utopia for Realists.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and you made a distinction between good UBI and bad UBI. Bad UBI being Andrew Yang, and then good UBI supposedly on the camp of Rutger Bregman.
Right.
But
I have this tweet
Rutger
actually
Bregman
too.
Did
yeah.
say Rutger Bregman did say, of course, when we install UBI. Sorry, I'm out of breath because of the nerves.
Okay. Yeah, I got the tweet here. I got the tweet here. I can just read it. Bregman retweeted out a Scott Satins link that said, "This is a really important article by Scott Satins about Andrew Yang's freedom dividend. Yes, there are better versions of UBI, but there is no policy proposal by any 2020 presidential candidate more progressive." And my problem with that is that the reasons it's not the best version of UBI, as even Rutger admits there, is because it's making these trade-offs that we're all talking about with these welfare cuts, and it's going on this based on an idea that they're going to pass this with Republican bipartisan support. And if you're going to do that, it's going to get worse and worse on this welfare front than it is in this campaign mode.
I would look. Let's have a $2,000 a month UBI funded by a wealth tax.
But here's the thing that I think that people misunderstand too. They're also looking at these things in a vacuum. And it's not like there is some type of situation where we have a choice. UBI, and Scott Satins, I think, has certainly said on the interview I did with him a couple of years ago, that he would get rid of food stamps. And as opposed to the freedom that would come, in my mind, from a single-payer health care program that would relieve Americans of that burden, of things like a free public option on higher education, expanded universal pre-K, and frankly, just more generosity in existing programs. Because once you cut
Well, I
away,
think
once
Andrew
you,
Yang-
excuse me, once you cut away food stamps,
Sorry.
and we go through another recession, and people's economic situations get demonstrably worse, right? Because no one contemplates the idea that on $12,000 a year in the United States, that any number of significant percentage of people are going to be able to live their lives. They're going to obviously have to get a job. And there are times, like we had 8 years ago, I guess 10 years ago now, where we lost millions upon millions of jobs. And when that happened, millions upon millions of people then suddenly became eligible for food stamps. Or as I guess you would put it, they lost their freedom to not get food supplement. But that's what happened. It's an economic stabilizer. Many of our programs deal with kick in for people when they suffer some type of economic hardship. And if you were to tell me that people are going to get $12,000 a year and still we're going to have these programs, I'd be fine with that. But it's not like I'm pulling it out of my arse in saying that it has been a long-standing programmatic agenda of the libertarian right to use a UBI of some sort to cut away at these social safety net programs. I'm not making that up. And when Andrew Yang goes on, and apparently Scott Santens, who was vociferous about cutting things like food stamps, when he goes on to a program and says, this is the way that we get rid of this $600 billion boondoggle that is the social safety net, that's what I worry about. So you don't need to argue the policy to me. I'm talking about the politics.
There's a lot to go into, and of course I don't have enough time. But what I did one of the most important things I wanted to say was that in Utopia for Realists, Rutger Bregman actually strongly criticizes like welfare programs, food stamps, those kinds of welfare, policies, not Medicare for all or a minimum wage or whatever, but specifically those programs that have a lot of control and et cetera, et cetera. And I noticed that in the podcast of your colleague,
Literary
that
I didn't listen to Matt's.
His
I
name
apologize.
is Mustache Matt.
I didn't listen to Matt's podcast, but
His name is Stretch.
and you can send him an email and maybe he'll read it. But here's the point.
Well,
Listen.
what I wanted to say is that I think Rutger Bregman disagrees with you, and since you had him on a show, but you didn't really talk about UBI.
Well, we did. But
Sam hates freedom, sir.
I'm not sure if you kind of talked about like Andrew Yang's version of UBI, et cetera, et cetera.
We're not going to
you don't understand here. I'm going to hang up on you now because I'm going to say this one more time. I get his version of UBI. It is everyone gets a freedom buck, 1,000 freedom bucks a month. I get that. This is not a hard thing to understand. And call me when we have single payer health care and everybody gets it, doesn't have to pay for it. And when we have these other things that Walter Bregman and I agree upon. And then if you want to talk about cutting food stamps for people to replace it with $1,000 a month, I'm down for that. But do you understand what I'm saying here? The sequencing matters. The sequencing matters when I watched a video of Andrew Yang. I'm not assessing anything. I'm watching him say, because it's not politically palatable to cut these programs, we will entice people off these programs by offering them, in some instances, $250 extra a month. Some instances, $500 extra a month, right? Because even though they're giving $1,000, they're giving up $500 or $750 or whatever. Programs that are not generous enough, I agree with that. And that's the way that we'll end these programs. And then we'll just have the one payment that we give to everybody. And then I can tell you what will happen. Okay? The Democrat gets into office. The Republicans say we've got to cut the budget. And there's no reason, there's no reason why, because I've seen Democrats say this, why we should be giving $1,000 to people who don't need it. And they will start to cut the program. They're getting everybody in one barrel, and they'll cut the program. And that's the way that it works.
Sam.
Appreciate the call.
Sam. Sam.
Please.
Let him go.
I'd let him go.
Okay.
Sam.
Yeah.
You have discussed UBI on this program several times, but you have not addressed Andrew Yang's specific version of it.
I interviewed Scott Sands. I've interviewed maybe.
Well, if you interviewed it, why don't you release the interview?
Can I address this? Because he's talking about me. He's not talking about Sam. But guess what? I don't disagree with a lot of what Rucker Bregman says about means-tested welfare programs. You're going to find a lot of agreement about what that's.
Sam, I listened to your colleague's podcast.
I disagree with him on the politics.
On his podcast, he said he wanted to blow Rucker Bregman and hates Andrew Yang.
This is like a classic case of people going like, I hear the reason why you disagree with me, but I want you to agree with me. So I'm going to keep saying, agree with me.
Well, I mean, it's also like literally if you get these people going, obsessing with you.
First it was I was hiding the podcast that this guy was on. I couldn't remember what it was. It turned out I did it, and we put it out on Ring of Fire. Because I don't know, on any given year, 400, 500, 600 interviews. And I think we even put it on the best of Ring of Fire.
Look. It's
Why are you hiding things?
There is a left... And the other problem here is that he always says basically that you can't actually achieve anything that is necessary to democratize society. So you can't have a wealth tax. You can't break up monopolies. We're going to have $1,000, which we've already outlined all the ways it might jeopardize necessary programs. And then that's going to be funded through a VAT. And honestly, I personally can't move past that because that's conceding so much demented foundational ground. Like somehow we're going to have a VAT, but it's not going to be regressive.
Exactly.
It's going to hurt.
Well, it's not going to be regressive because the idea is this.
No,
you're going to pay more with the VAT, but you're going to get more back on the other thing.
And the other point is though is that somehow it's only going to apply to certain like quote unquote like higher end transactions.
Luxury items.
Right. And that, by the way, then that's the flip where that's all of a sudden that's going to hurt Amazon. So the rest of the time that we can't even hope to deal with the political power of Amazon, we can't even hope to deal with monopolies. We can't even hope to deal with any of these things, which, by the way, if that's your perspective, the ship has already sailed. We're done. And maybe, by the way, that is the most honest representation, which is that we're going to have a tech feudalist system.
Right.
We're not going to achieve anything. We're not going to have a robust democracy. And Mark Zuckerberg will give you a little bit of money so you can like play video games in a tiny little pod. And that is incredibly depressing and bleak. But
and not a utopia.
That's not quite utopia. But I'm not going to concede foundational grounds that have not been worked out other than he's a good person, take our word for it, and then having emotional meltdowns if you don't agree.
Yeah, Yang Gang is really something else.
I've never seen anything quite like it because there's some notion of like there's a secret silver bullet, and you're completely ignoring it because you disagree with how it's going to be implemented.
Get Rand Paul to vote for it.
Let's see here. Let's get to the IMs. Ooh, we got a lot of... Oh, here we go. The king of all IMers. Sam, one summer during middle school, my dad, concerned with my education and interest in reading, forced me to read various books and write an essay on each. One of the books was Animal Farm. My assignment, upon claiming I had finished reading it, was to compare the story to the lyrics of Won't Get Fooled Again by The Who. I had no idea how to reply because I hadn't read it and it was obvious. Anyway, consider this a parenting suggestion of my dad through me to you. I will do that. Rave Fromia. Hey, Sam, big fan, especially love that Michael Brooks guy. The other day I was watching the show and I accidentally clicked on a Dave Rubin video. It was terrible, and I don't think you should even bother with that guy. If I was you, I would stop trying to debate him, doing videos or impressions of him, or even saying his name on the show. Just like an idea to think about.
No.
Oh, wait, it's Rave from L.A.
Oh. Why even waste your time?
Yeah, totally. You've got much better things to do. Sam, I hope to see you again on Hayes to discuss this deconstruction of the administrative state. Sadly, promise kept. This and the courts, it's so critical, and why mobilization versus focus on persuasion is the key strategy. Only bright light last week was the Omar clip and the Boricus protest giving me life. Interview today was great. Reminds me of that cultural capital. Boricuas.
Boricua. Boricus protest.
But it's really socioeconomic capital in the end. Congressional baseball fan. Sam, just wanted to let you know I'm enjoying the new daily morning content. But the other day I was talking to my Wi-Fi TV and said, Alexa, give me an AM quickie. And Alexa responded, I have a headache. So I spent the night on the couch watching a bunch of a Gold Godzilla movie. We're working on the Alexa thing. New Human. I can completely vouch for the idea management software on Capterra. I used the program to create a perfect playlist of low to high level ideas, evenly spacing my idea refractory periods so I could spend less time in recovery mode. Teacher Harry. Hey, Sam, that was a fantastic interview. Food insecurity and housing problems are a huge issue in our elementary, middle, and high schools as well. So the idea that those issues go away the moment these students go to college and we can stop thinking about it or expect the students to fend themselves while their more well-to-do counterparts relax and study is absurd and deeply unfair. The OkCupid story was a little sickening, not to mention frightening. Shifting topics, what are your thoughts on a socialized version of auto insurance? Peaches. I think that could work. Marianne sensually dominated Dave.peg.
What I really want to know what that is.
Marianne's sensually dom Dave.mpeg.
Oh, good mental image.
Hey, Sam, have your glasses ever fogged up while your shoes fell off simultaneously? Thanks. Bullprog. Depending on how the Cesar Sayak trial goes, did you think it could lead to legal precedent for cases against scholastic terrorism versus spreading false and misleading information? It's disheartening to see the outbreak of brainworms. We desperately need a cure and future prevention. His lawyers are arguing Trump and Fox News radicalized him.
Dangerous idea.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't
Are you
think
kidding
so.
me, dude?
I'm gonna go free speech. Absolutely.
You're gonna really want to trust the intelligence apparatus of different countries to start defining content as acts of terrorism, dude. That is absolutely a form of liberal Trump derangement syndrome.
Joe 44.
Get back to first principles, buddy.
Larry Kudlow is more of a Coke guy. Well, people evolve. Pajama Boy. Hey, crew, need your take on a Bernie Staffer story. I don't trust a lot of the sources reporting on it. You guys going to do a reaction to Mueller's testimony with Michael Tracy tomorrow? I commit major wage theft every day listening to MR at work.
Hell yeah, that's praxis.
That is awesome.
I don't know. I need to dig more into the Staffer story.
Oh, it's bullshit. It's bullshit. They've already resolved it. They've actually the deal is that they've created is that they're basically not working above 40 hours a week. So when they don't do extra hours, they are at 15 a day and they do get benefits. And there was upset inside the labor union of the campaign because they were like, we're in the middle of negotiations and figuring this out. And somebody leaked it and created a trash headline.
They screwed over their own union too. Air sign cowboy, Sam Michael, live in the great state of Jefferson in Northern California, a bit south of Oregon. My specific city has a real problem with a very profitable church trying to pray the LGBTQ community out and running church elders for city councilor and winning, sadly. They're buying up the city, painting over our cool murals. Please send Sam Harris. JK, don't do that to us. P.S. I would love to send you more information about this and would like to hear, to state that the plan is to run against her. I'm not sure I follow any of that, but send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Smoot Court, I like how Dave was channeling his past guests in an interview with Marianne. Larry Elder debunking structural racism, Jordan Peterson's anti-collectivism, Peter Thiel libertarianism. Only Dave doesn't have their chops, and so his experiences culminated in a disaster. It was like Slumdog Millionaire, except for he's incompetent. Feels like a dinosaur. Sam's very young son takes time crafting a joke to bond with his former comedian father. Sam, what the hell do you want from me? A laugh? All you did was misdirect. There's no direction, no purpose. Well, that's true. Dog DNA testers puts bark in company name. Sam stifling giggles. That's what doggies do. That's pretty good. Western Masshole. Went to Alex Moore's campaign kickoff rally in Holyoke last night. Pretty good turnout. A lot of energy in the room. Looking forward to phone banking for him. I think he has a real chance. Keep us updated on that.
I have to admit, I really liked the woman who challenged Neil last time. I'm not recalling her name. I wonder why that didn't. That might have gotten more traction this time, but we'll see about Morse. Anything would be an improvement.
It would be good. That would be a nice win. Let's see. Let's take good time for one more call. 321 area code. Who's this?
Hey, Sam. It's Marcus the Brazilian, man. How's it going?
Marcus the Brazilian. What's on your mind?
Not much. I just want. Are you guys okay with all the flooding going on right now? In Brooklyn.
I mean, are we like? I'm not sure what you mean by okay. Like, are we okay as in safe, or are we okay like this is cool?
Yeah, safe.
Yeah, no, we're
We are okay, but we are not okay with it.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, got it. No, the reason I'm calling, I was wondering if you guys saw the story. It came up on my feed last Friday about George Nader being convicted, or I guess he pled not guilty to essentially trying to traffic 14-year-old boy in like child pornography. He's this Trump official. He was representing the Crown Prince of the UAE at the Seychelles meeting between Eric Prince and a Russian.
Oh, I didn't realize that he was
CEO
from there.
Of a Russian investment
It's connected
fund.
with the Emiratis, yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean he's a Trump official and he's around
I
the
don't know
White
if he's
House.
an
He's
official.
been around the
I
White
think
House
he's.
a lot.
I don't know if he has an official title. He's certainly.
He's a Trumpista.
Yeah, he's a Trumpista.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was just seeing if you guys read this because, I mean, it just kind of hit me like the kind of people that Trump surrounds himself with aren't just oligarchs and warmongers and white nationalists, but it seems to be serial pedophiles as well. I mean, you have, what was the billionaire that was just caught with, I'm forgetting his name.
Epstein, right?
Epstein, yeah. So you got Epstein, and then you have this George Nader guy. They're like both. I mean, this George Nader guy, he was caught in the 80s with, I think, child pornography. But I think he's been caught several times. But this time he was caught actually transporting a 14-year-old boy from Europe and got caught in Jules Airport here in the States.
Someone told me that when we saw the release of the some of the stuff in the filing dealing with Epstein, I should say one I know somebody who saw there was a handwritten note apparently to his assistant. And one of the magicians, who was David Copperfield or somebody, was on the list, and he called the number and he reached David Copperfield. But that aside, there was one thing that said there were tapes that said young blank with blank. And it was suggested that part of the scandal that has not come out is that there weren't just girls. There was also boys, which may be more about blackmailing. I mean, look, I don't know if we're ever going to know the truth behind all this stuff. It's very, very strange. And it's unclear to me.
I just want to, can I just say just really quickly, I mean, I do
Appreciate
think
the call.
George
Gotta keep
Nader
moving.
is someone people should be, be very attentive to. And he's an advisor to the Crown Prince of the UAE. And he's a consultant specifically to Eric Prince of Blackwater. And he linked up with, I think, Donald Trump Jr. in 2016. But his record goes back to the 80s. And I think also, not Bannon, but I believe Bannon was briefly involved in some type of video game currency company in Hong Kong or Thailand, and one of the founders might have had a history like that as well. So,
all right, I got a couple of clips here I want to make sure we get to, and then we'll get out of here. So, folks, we don't have time for any more calls. I'm sorry. Don't want to keep you holding longer than we can. This is worth watching. As we look at what's going on with the courts, as we look at the attempts by the Democrats in 2020 to take over the Senate, there is one person who I think, like, their usefulness as a senator has reached an impossible all-time low. Susan Collins preens and has pretended that she is some type of moderate. I'm just speaking, within the context of American politics. She pretends that she is a moderate. And she must do so because that's important to Maine voters. If Susan Collins portrayed herself as what she is and what she enables, because the Republican Party has made it impossible for its members to pretend to be moderate within the context of what the American political spectrum is. And therefore, if you're going to try and sell that pretense, it becomes increasingly hard, and you have to get more and more performative without actually performing the one thing that would make you a moderate, which is voting against the radical agenda of your party. Speaking out against when they don't allow for the most basic functionings of the Senate in terms of meeting and deciding upon a judge, or voting for the most reprehensible judges who would turn the clock back on everything that you pretend to support. And so this ad has been released that I think it could be one of the best ads I've seen in a long time about a politician who literally does not, in fact, walk the talk that she has.
I'm disappointed. I'm very disappointed. I was really disappointed. And that really troubles me. Well, I'm very disappointed. I'm disappointed. I was really disappointed and dismayed. But I disagree strongly. I'm disappointed.
Disappointing Susan Collins. Vote her out of the Senate. That thing is genius.
It's a total bummer.
She's constantly saying she feels bad about having to support an agenda she totally disagrees with.
If only there was something she could do about that.
It's so disappointing in a way.
During the Bush era, there was Lincoln Chafee, who was a Republican, who voted against all of Bush. He voted against Bush's initiatives more than a lot of Democrats. Yep. So you are able to do that.
You are allowed to do that in
Only
our
Republican
system.
to vote against the invasion of Iraq, as an example.
There's a story, and we won't have time to get to it today, but of a 16-year-old boy born in Dallas, Texas. Apparently made the 18-year-old boy made the bad choice of having the name Francisco Irwin Galatia, and apparently having a complexion that was not white. He was, of course, 18-year-old, traveling only with a school ID, because you're not allowed to do that in America. His brother was carrying only a Texas ID, which can only be obtained with a Social Security number. And apparently, they were going to see a soccer scouting event. They got into a CBP checkpoint, and this kid got basically held in CBP custody for weeks. For weeks. The CBP and ICE attempted to basically round up a couple thousand immigrants over the past couple of days, and they were stopped in some instances. They failed in others. They ended up arresting 35 people. But here is a clip of folks in Hermitage, Tennessee, and an ICE official tried to get a man into custody, and neighbors formed a human chain to allow the man and his son to get home.
Están unidas, las organizaciones están defendiendo a esta familia. A los agentes los vemos a aquel lado. Los agentes están allá en una camioneta verde también al parecer. No sabemos si esta camioneta también viene con ellos.
There's ICE agents in the van.
Ya están haciendo una cadena para proteger a esta familia. En este momento, esto es lo que está pasando. ¡Vamos! Está saliendo el niño.
They're protecting the son and the father as they get into the
house. Y
house.
bueno, ya están a salvo. Se están aplaudiendo porque defendieron a esta familia. Bueno, pues aquí vemos a la familia. Están entrando. ¿Estás bien? ¿Qué nos puedes decir rápidamente?
Ay, muchas gracias por todo, de verdad se los agradezco por el apoyo de tu corazón, gracias.
Estas son las palabras de esta esposa, de esta madre que hoy está. Tenías miedo de que ya no se llevaran a tu esposo.
Mi hijo y mi esposo, pero gracias, Dios es bien grande y todas las personas que nos apoyaron, gracias de verdad, muchas gracias de todo.
Al contrario. Coméntanos.
So they were able to protect this father and son. I'm not sure what their status were. Of course, we're all much worse off because these two people are in this country. I'm sure everybody's feeling the pain right now.
I feel less safe.
Feel less safe. The idea that a father and son would still be with their mother or wife is a horrific concept. And we should be expending millions of dollars, billions of dollars to make sure this can't happen. And that seems to be the agenda of a huge swath of Americans. But good for those folks.
Life.
There has to be more of this. That's why it was important to play this video. To give people, to broaden people's imagination and courage as to what they can do when they see these type of situations. You do not have to give ICE your papers. Show them your documents. And for every person who is a citizen who does not comply with ICE's requests, because they do not have authority over you, the more it gums up their works. ICE's acting director complained, "It's unfortunate that our honorable law enforcement agency is subject to such a protest." This is a memo that ICE went into lockdown during Tuesday's protest. I think that took place outside of this. Ken Klippenstein from TYT report.
This was on July 17th.
And it helps. This is one of those agencies where you can really gum up the works. And so if you have the opportunity to do so, do so.
I mean,
you're on a bus and they come on and start acting for asking for papers, start questioning them. Under what authority are you doing this? Is the bus company allowing you to do this? What are the names of the bus company? I want to talk to the bus manager. Just be a pain in the butt. If you hold them up for 20 minutes, half an hour, who knows? Maybe you're helping some family that you'll never meet.
Yeah, you're using their resources of time up.
Exactly.
That's really important.
Yep. And also, please, in addition to that, everyone needs to be getting involved in long-term immigrant justice organizing, because that's the only thing that's really going to help in the long run.
Let's preview the the Mueller testimony tomorrow. Jared Nadler, as you know, the DOJ has told Robert Mueller to remain within the boundaries of the Mueller report. Now, Mueller is no longer working for the Justice Department. He doesn't need to listen to them any more than I do about the lawful testimony that he's going to give. Here is Jerry Nadler expressing that Mueller does not need to listen to the DOJ.
I don't think they have any authority to instruct him in that way. Must he comply with that letter?
No, he must. No, he does not have to comply with that letter. He doesn't work for them, and that letter asks things that are beyond the power of the agency to ask, even if he still worked for them.
There you go. He's supposed to testify in front of Congress. They want to know how he developed his report. He should be speaking outside of the bounds of the report. That's the whole point.
There were these literary historians called the New Critics that came out of the South, and one of the things they want to do is keep you really focused on the text and nothing extraneous to the text, like historical or social surrounding of the text. A little bit of a flashback there.
Yeah, you know, this posture by Mueller, that's all well and good. In your role as a prosecutor, it is perfectly appropriate for you to offer the report and then offer nothing else. But you are not a prosecutor. You are a witness in this instance. And you are giving Congress information that it wants. That is your job as a citizen. So he has a responsibility to do this. Responsibility that trumps the role that he did have, because he no longer has that role. If he thinks it's out of bounds for Congress to ask these questions, that's on Congress. He's not God. He's not king. He has a responsibility to answer these questions. We may not like the answers, but he has a responsibility to answer the questions. And I guess we'll find out tomorrow if he does so. But I don't buy this, he's a good guy with a sense of honor, and that's why he won't go outside the bounds of a prosecutor. He's not a prosecutor anymore. What if he had done this report 30 years ago? He's not a prosecutor anymore. The American public has the right to know if the president was involved in activities that don't necessarily reach the level of criminality as defined by our statutes, but ones that people might find reprehensible for a president to be involved in. Ken Starr certainly let us know stuff that did not involve criminality. We know a lot of details still to this day about Bill Clinton.
Hell yeah. What? Dipset.
Blue dress is not criminal.
So wrong, but not criminal. It's so right. Why do you keep misrepresenting Andrew Yang's UBI?
All right. Lastly, as you know,
you get a net increase. He says that himself.
As you know, they say that Republicans fall in line. Democrats want to fall in love. And as you know, Michael falls in and out of love with a lot of different number twos running for presidential election.
That's correct.
Marianne.
One day it's Marianne Williamson. The next day it's this guy. And I have a feeling that on this Tuesday, Michael's heart has been given to Bill de Blasio. As you know, as you heard, we had some flash flooding, but we've obviously had some power outages because, well, the thing is, we don't know why we've had power outages. I can tell you something that's very predictable. There will always be 3 or 4 days, sometimes it's a week or two, where New York City will hit 90 degrees plus, and it's super hot, and everybody doesn't want to do anything. They just go into their apartments, and they turn on their air conditioning. Now, you do not have to be an expert to know that when everybody turns on their air conditioning, it's going to put strain on the grid. This is not a new phenomena. Theoretically, the company that has a monopoly on providing power for people should be set up to address this. But one thing that we know for sure in every circumstance, when you talk about private enterprise, sometimes they'll do horrific things if they think that it will make them profits and they only have to pay back a little bit of that money. I see this every time I go to Las Vegas and talk to tort lawyers. Pharmaceutical companies, yeah, we knew it caused this problem, we knew it caused that problem, or we knew the manufacturer of this active ingredient was letting jet fuel in it. However, we'd already expended a lot of money and we made a lot of money from it, and then we know down the road it's always cheaper to say you're sorry than to ask for permission. And we don't know why we have these blackouts. We don't know for sure why Con Ed decided to shut down the power in areas that may have people with less incomes or not as much political power because maybe they're not white. But we do know that we should get answers, and if we don't get those answers, there's a problem. And it would be nice to have things like power be something that we never have to think, did they just put on a fewer people or not upgrade their infrastructure as much because they want to save money? Because some of this money has to go to shareholders. What if all that money that didn't go to shareholders went into rebuilding the grid or maintaining the grid or improving the grid? What if all that extra cash just actually went to providing the service to people that everybody knows they're going to need going forward? Bill de Blasio is sort of toying with that idea.
To tell us what happened, why it happened, how they are taking steps to make sure it won't happen again. They have not given me a good answer. This situation in Brooklyn came at the very tail end of the heat emergency. So obviously Con Ed knew they were dealing with an extraordinary situation. Once again, I spoke to the Con Ed president last night. I spoke to him this morning. No answers whatsoever as to why this happened and what is being done to ensure it will not happen again. This was obviously a predictable situation and therefore preventable. What we're getting continually is no clarity, no answers, no real timelines from Con Ed. So at this point, I said earlier in the week that I was having trouble trusting them. I can't trust them at this point because I'm not getting any real answers, and they have let New Yorkers down once again. It's very clear there needs to be a full investigation into what happened not only last Saturday, but what happened last night. It's very clear we have to question whether Con Ed, as it's structured now, can do the job going forward or whether we need to go to an entirely different approach. So I'm calling for a full investigation, and further that we examine whether we need a new entity to handle this situation going forward, because at this point I do not have faith in Con Edison. Questions on this immediate situation? Yes?
You mentioned when you started talking, Mayor, that you feel like there's a bigger problem here, there's a bigger issue with Con Ed. Elaborate on that. What is that bigger problem?
Look, Con Ed is a private company that is heavily regulated, but they're still a private company. They're not accountable to the public in the way a public agency would be. The Department of Environmental Protection provides water to the people in New York City. If at some point the water was shut off, we, the city government, would have to provide immediate answers. We'd have to show people that it was being fixed, and we knew exactly why it happened and exactly how it would not happen again. Con Ed is very haughty about this. They don't give real answers, and they don't feel they have to. So I think it begs the question of whether a private company should continue to provide a service if they are not accountable to the public.
There you go.
Second choice.
Deadass.
Although it is easier, in the Marianne Williamson case, it's like, hey, Marianne, when you're not dunking on Dave, shouldn't you be writing another book or developing another seminar? In Bill's case, you could say that's great, Bill, dunk on Beto, but fix the subways. But you know what? This is a good.
Well, he doesn't. I mean, the subways are really more the problem.
He does not have control of the subways. This is true. But this is actually. Honestly, though, this is actually a perfect fusion because he should be doing more of this. Both, by the way, just tactically, talking about universal pre-K and actually bragging about his record, and then taking other examples to do something like this where he's dealing with a city crisis that he still is mayor of, also as a trial balloon to show that he's got an agenda.
Putting all the politics aside, in terms the electoral politics aside, the idea of the country's of the mayor of the largest city in the country, who, being mayor of this city is, from an executive perspective, an extremely challenging job. The idea of the mayor of this city coming out and calling for what would be, equivalent to the nationalization of our energy supply, our energy producers and deliverers, I think is quite significant. And this is important. And if for nothing else, de Blasio needs to be elevated on some level, just because, to my mind, he's the most prominent national figure who has even floated this idea. I don't even know if I've even heard anybody float the idea. And it's absolutely the case. There is absolutely no reason why our energy is provided by private companies. There's absolutely no reason. We heavily regulate them to the point where it's obvious that the market cannot handle it. And so the only reason why we don't nationalize this at this point is like tradition and some type of like weird superstition.
Fealty to the private sector.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously moneyed, interests that are involved in this. But in terms of but in terms of like the public, I don't think the public contemplates it as an ideological thing. I think it's just sort of tradition. And had it always been the case, but there's no reason why we have private entities doing, owning the pipelines for our cable. And there's no reason why we have private entities delivering us energy. These should be government services. There's no difference.
North Dakota is suing the federal government to to compensate themselves for the policing of the protests for Dakota Access Pipeline. So I mean, how about make Energy Transfer Partners pay for it?
There we go.
Or nationalize them.
And anyone who thinks that utilities would be less efficient as a public enterprise has clearly never tried to deal with Time Warner Cable.
Right, of course. I mean, of course. And you could still, if Time Warner Cable wants to still be the delivering of services, let them do it. Let them do it. You can have Time Warner, you can subscribe to Time Warner or Verizon or whoever it is.
Or a municipal broadband that both of those will try to sue out of existence.
Exactly. We're going to take over your cables. We're going to put it in there. I mean, Verizon's a perfect example of like, we're not getting any innovation out of that. They put down the fiber. They realize like, oh, we can't make enough money off the fiber, so we're not going to offer it in the places that we pretended we were going to offer it. Well, here's my plan. We'll take over your fiber business. We'll put it in there with union workers all across the country. We're going to put fiber in every single person's home, the last mile or two, maybe a little bit different. You want to do the last mile? Maybe we could talk about that. But we're going to run fiber across this country. It's going to be accessible to everybody. You want to offer the DVR service? Great. You want to offer, your TV service, your on-demand service? Great. Go ahead. You guys we'll give the private companies the content, but we're putting this service into everybody's home. Same with the electricity. The electricity that I get is no different from the electricity that people across the country get.
Number 2, Bill. Number 2, number 3.
It's also easier to make it a site of struggle when something becomes a nationalized public utility, right?
What do you mean a site of struggle?
Like, you can go protest for energy justice outside of Con Ed, or you can do it outside of, a government agency. And I feel like the latter will be a little more effective.
Well, if it's a government agencies, theoretically, the idea would be that it is some form of economic justice. By making it a public
robots
entity,
are going to take your
it
jobs.
will not make a difference whether you're putting this in a wealthy community or not a wealthy
I
community.
mean, there's
or
still plenty of
rural area.
malfeasance that could happen. As we know, the
course.
state is not always fair to everyone historically.
Of course.
But I think you're going to get more bang for your buck trying to protest and struggle against the state than you will a private company.
People talk about the DMV not being good. My experience with the DMV is usually pretty good. My experience with the post office is also usually pretty good.
Yeah, I had to go to the passport office.
Imagine if we funded the post office.
I'm always impressed at how efficient it is when I go to the passport office.
So these are pretty good services. I don't know. Have anybody tried to? I waited on hold for Verizon to get my cable fixed for over an hour the other day. For over an hour. That's longer than I've ever waited at the DMV.
Now you know how the
Suck
listeners feel.
on that. Competition, guess what competition did? It did not kick in. All right, that's it, folks. We will see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid.